Hello, everybody. Once again, I have took the place of Carl. You poor souls haven't listened to me waffle, but we have someone who has not had much of a social life this weekend because he's joining us. Um, and first of all, Ant, welcome back. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good, thanks, mate. I thought I'm going to be back next year anyway, so I might as well get my feet well and truly firmly back in the door.
I like that. Just plant the seeds, and then we'll just jump straight back into it in the summer. The one advantage if we don't go up, at least we can do the shows again. So that's at least a good thing. To be honest, I'll probably still do them anyway, but who knows? And Annie is with us as always. As I'm sure he was the one who was asking if we were doing anything tonight when Bristol City win a game. Funnily enough, but to be fair to you, it was a very big win. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, all things considered, not doing too badly.
Not doing too badly, apart from just George. What was it, George Earthy? Is that have I got his first name right?
Diego Maradona, Michael.
Fair enough. Do you know what it is? I was listening to the well, obviously Annie will know this because he interviewed Dana Mott from the Borough Breakdown podcast, and one of their guys on there, I think, make a Google Earth joke, and then a player with the surname Earthy scored twice against them, which was actually very, very funny.
I'm just in the middle of listening to it. I think it was Tom. I think I caught that.
Oh well, sorry if I've spoiled it for you, but yeah, it did make me laugh. To be fair, if you when you're on your bad run of form, you need to have a bit of humour, don't you? So there you go. So yeah, what I thought we'll do is obviously we'll just I'll do what we normally do, go through all of the championship fixtures, and if it's all right with you two, I'm going to save the Sunderland and Burnley games until the end because I want to sort of because obviously there's a group in the group chat we've got. There was an interesting discussion that I kind of want to get onto, so we'll segue into that at the end, but. Let's start with the playoff race, and I'll tell you what. Should we start with Andy's team for once, and let's give him the spotlight early on. Yeah, just to throw it in there. Bristol City 2, Middlesbrough 1. I was about to call them the name I called them off air, but it would be very appropriate. But yeah, let's just say Bristol City won the Tommy Conway derby, which I can imagine that was obviously the big talking point of the game. Tommy Conway going back to Ashton Gate since leaving to join Borough in the summer. Of course, he does that, and then his team doesn't have the last laugh, which is quite funny. So, yeah, 1-0 Borough at half time. From what I did watch of it, I felt Borough weren't. I think it was a pretty dull game in the sense that neither team really gripped the game by the scruff of the neck. But to be fair, Liam Manning, I believe Earthy came on, scores 2 goals as a substitution. So I need to take it away. What a win that is for you boys.
Yeah, I mean, first off, as you mentioned, it was quite.
Scrappy?
Wouldn't say scrappy. It was just. I think both teams weren't able. Both of us, trying to play this possessions
Yeah,
control style of play.
get a foothold in
Middlesbrough,
it.
yeah, trying to control the game as you said. Middlesbrough completely devoid of any confidence. Like four, 5 losses in a row. I think it was
I
before.
think it's 5
Five,
defeats in a row and something like 6 defeats in 7, I think. Something
yeah,
like that.
it's a completely abject form from Borough. They looked really, really kind of vulnerable on the ball. They changed two of their defenders in the back line. They not played that much. Dale Fry and Dyke Steele, they were trying to work themselves into the game. Um, I say Bristol City created the better chances. Scott Twine hit one from range that went over. And then towards the end of the half, there was that Max Bird shot straight at Mark Travers. Not straight at Mark Travers. Mark Travers pulls off a ridiculous save. And then Scott Twine puts the rebound wide. Borough, I'd say, were quite fortunate to go in ahead. I'd say I think both teams deserved to score. Delano Bergsall had a scuff shot from inside the 6 yard box, it looked like, just wide. Um, I'd say both sides probably warranted a goal. Bristol City couldn't find that kind of cutting edge in the final third. Borough score from, well, Iheanacho in down the left hand side, hits a shot. It's a pretty tame shot. Uh, Maxillary parries it to, of course, it's fucking Tommy Conway, right there. Um, and I'm I'm in the kind of camp of I'm the kind of in between where I didn't like how he left us, but
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I also appreciate that he's in the last year of his contract. He's a professional footballer; he can do whatever he wants, really. And
There's a
it's
way you leave a club, though, isn't there? Like
yeah, and it's
if you leave with a bit of grace, then or at least leave professionally. It's a bit better, if you know what I mean. Just to
Yeah,
quickly
it's not.
compare, if you look at, like, say Johnny Rowe versus Jack Clark at the start of the season, for example. Like, Jack Clark for us could have easily sulked and could have not played, but he showed professionalism to the end, and that's why I've got a lot of respect for Clark. Whereas Johnny Rowe basically went on strike. So I'm not saying Conway did
Sammy
do that.
Smodic with Blackburn didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying Conway did
Yeah.
do that, but yeah, I think you have every right to be frustrated at the way he left, but you can still, at least you got a good bit of money for him.
Yeah, and the added factor that he's been at the club 14 years since he was a literal child, and then just kind of leaves after half a relatively all right season, and I'm sure he was probably vying for a kind of Premier League move, which felt a bit early for him. Maybe another season or two in the Championship would have done him good. He's found himself at Borough, and I'm glad he's doing well over at Borough. That was tongue in cheek. Come on, guys. Come on. Yeah, he scored.
Annie, who had the last laugh in the end?
I'm not going to resort to slandering Tommy Conway. I'll do that in my private time.
I'm not saying slander Tommy Conway. I'm just saying the result says Bristol City 2 versus Middlesbrough 1. So that explains everything.
To be fair to Conway, scores a very kind of very good number 9 goal. Could have been easy to go offside there. Doesn't go offside. But one thing that Liam Manning has instilled within this Bristol City team, and one thing we are so good at and have been so good at this season, is sort of coming back from difficult positions. There was the home game against Oxford, which immediately pops up to mind, where we just lost a couple of games in a row. The pressure was humongously on Liam Manning. We were 1-0 down at home to Oxford. We could have so easily fallen apart. Oxford completely hit the bar a couple of times. And then we turned that game around to win it, and then that's kind of sparked some really good form since then. This game, towards the end of that first half, we built a bit of pressure, built a bit of momentum. Didn't get the goal, but it felt like if that first half went on for 5 more minutes, we would have scored. That's what it felt like. So halftime came at a bit of a bad time, and the fear at that point was, can we kind of take it? Can we go again in the second half? We went again, and we just didn't stop. I think we had 70-something% possession in the second half, which is, if you think about it, against a Michael Carrick side, against this Middlesbrough side with the kind of technical quality they have, Whittaker, Azaz off the bench, Hackney, Aidan Morris in there. It's incredibly impressive for a Bristol City team that's still kind of learning on the job, really, in a lot of ways, in terms of still trying to adapt to the style of play. So really, really good. And then the first goal, a little bit fortunate, because the first ball across the box from the right hand side is not great. It's not good. And then the ball kind of ricochets back. Scott Twine misses it, and then Earthy's kind of just there, and he's kind of, how do you get there? I fell kind of, position, but puts it in the back of the net, and then from that point on, 70-something minute, 72nd, I think it was, you're kind of going, right, they're under the pump here. They're flaky. They don't even have a single iota of confidence in them. If we can kind of keep going and keep putting pressure on, we're going to win this game. As you mentioned, Michael, that triple substitution on 63 or 62 or something like that,
Yeah.
massively changed the game. And obviously that's also helped by the fact that Michael Carrick, tactically got it horribly wrong. Didn't make a single substitution. Middlesbrough were completely under the pump second half, and he didn't change anything all game. And we got the second goal. Scott Twine free kick hits the bar. I think there are 9 Middlesbrough players inside the box who are closest to the ball. Not a single one of them moves. It's just mental. If any of our teams said that, we'd be bloody furious. But I'm obviously delighted none of them moved. And George Earthy's just there. I thought he was offside, to be honest. I was like, Christ, he's going to flag this. No, he was onside because none of them moved. And yeah, you get the win. And normally in a game like that, for 10 minutes after that, a team of Borough's quality, you'd expect a little bit of pressure. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We saw the game out really well and got the 3 points and moved temporarily, I think, for 15 hours into the top 6, which is... and I know, it sounds a bit tin pot, but I think a problem with not this Bristol City team, just Bristol City in general over recent years, whenever we've been in the playoff pushes, we've not been able to win that big home game. We've went up to Swansea a couple of weeks ago. I came on here and said we can't win big home games. Anytime there's an iota of pressure on us, we collapse. There was so much pressure on us, because we were the better team. Middlesbrough, we have a really good record against Middlesbrough, especially Ashton Gate. We completely put them under the pump. We were creating chances. If we hadn't won that game, that would have been a complete catastrophe. Right.
I know what you mean when your mouth gets out of your brain, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You just stumble into a word. Yeah.
And the fact that we turn it around shows the mentality of this group, and the fact that it's George Earthy scoring the 2 goals, who has not been kind of he's not been an Anis Mehmeti, for example, who's kind of popped up with goals, or a Sinclair Armstrong or a Scott Twine. He's been off the bench. He's had promise, but he's been kind of a little bit underwhelming. So for him to step up in that moment, 2 relatively good, relatively simple finishes, tap-ins, but still he's got to be there
to score them, though, haven't you?
Yeah, he's had some decent movement for that second goal in particular. So, really, really important win, and it just kind of breaks that psychological barrier in terms of, okay, we can get into the top 6. I know we've not stayed there; we're now 8th or something, but we can get in there, and that's the main thing. I think that's the main thing for me, and it shows that this group is capable of. It's not just words; it's actions, and I think that that performance on Friday night kind of cemented the fact that, okay, we're here to stay. We're not going to fall off here. We're not going to. How many games we've got? 12. We're not going to lose 9 of them. We're here to stay. We're in contention. And we'll talk about it in depth later. But the quality of the top 6 is not great this season. We've got every chance of getting in there if a West Brom and because there's so many kind of teams in this, there's so many head-to-heads, and we've got 3, I think, at least 3 absolutely humongous games at Ashton Gate, where we've got West Brom, we've got Watford, and we've got Norwich at Ashton Gate, and we've been really good at Ashton Gate. And we've still got to go to Loftus Road, we've still got to go to the Den to play Millwall as well. So some pretty big games still to come. So a good win, and to take points off Middlesbrough as well is just kind of added bonus.
Well, 6 points this season. I really you won at the Riverside as well. For some reason I had it in my head that you drew that game, and I don't know why. But yeah, just ignore me on that one. I think for Borough, we'll quickly touch on Middlesbrough. See what Ant thinks of this as well to make it balanced as well. I think with Michael Carrick, I always had the impression that if he didn't get the top 6 this season, it would be absolutely right that he was sacked, because when you look at Borough's squad, I've stood by what I've said. That I think a lot of people at the start of the season just slightly overrated Borough a little bit. But when I say overrated, I didn't mean enough for them to not be in the playoffs at the very least. And I've just looked at it. So I think it's 5 defeats in the last 7. They've lost every game in February, 5 defeats on the spin. They haven't picked up any points away from home since New Year's Day away at Hull, and bear in mind, just to be clear, they've lost to Portsmouth in that run, they've lost to Preston in that run as well. Bristol City, obviously, that's a different level, and Sheffield United, because they're obviously right near the top end of the league. But you look at the other teams I mentioned. How much longer do you think Michael Carrick realistically will have as Middlesbrough manager if this continues?
It's a difficult one because he is really highly rated, and rightly so. I think he's done so much right. But he's also got a squad now that is beyond where he's got it in the league. And I think goodwill will only last so long. And without having watched a huge amount of Middlesbrough, but every time I have watched him, and it just feels like it's a little bit stale and a little bit going through the motions more than like a couple of years ago when you looked at Carrick's teams, like the possession was like really high intensity and possession, like with a purpose. When I watch them now, it just looks like they knock the ball about for the sake of keeping the ball more than doing anything with it. And I don't know, it's a difficult one because if you get rid of Carrick, who can they realistically bring in who's going to be seen as an upgrade? But at the same time, it just does feel like it has gone incredibly stale.
Steve Cooper?
I remember why I stopped coming on for a while.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. No, being serious with it, I mean, the Steve Cooper would kind of go against a lot of what Middlesbrough's sort of identity is that they're trying to evolve into. That would be, and often I think it would probably be a coach that they don't expect. Like, he's in a coach you don't know a whole lot about. It might be a foreign coach with similar sort of principles to Michael Carrick. But for me personally, I mean, Middlesbrough, I think they've got 2 massive games coming up this week if they want to reignite their top 6 up, which is Stoke away, which is a game in hand because of the FA Cup, I think, and then they've got Derby at home next Saturday. Now, if they don't win at least one of those games, I would not be surprised if this time next Sunday Carrick's gone. Personally,
it's just the way they kind of collapsed to me. Just screamed of a team that so flaky, kind of so vulnerable to like
brittle as well.
And so brittle to any sort of pressure. There was the game against Sunderland where, they go 2-2, they equalise at 2-2, and you're going, okay, you're the home team, kind of either see this out against a good point against the top 4 team, or go in and try and attack them. They shoot. They don't help themselves. They shoot themselves in the foot sometimes. It's like some of the goals they've conceded this season is just comical. And I'm looking at their defence as fault for most of this. But yeah, as you mentioned, that game away at Stoke midweek is going to be important, and that home game against Derby. Well, Derby away from home is a banker of a loss at the moment, so it's got to be a win, really, for Michael Carrick. And yeah, the squad he's assembled is now his squad completely. I know they sold Emmanuel Latte-Lath, and that wasn't ideal, the timing of it, but it's just kind of that's there now. That's a top championship level squad, and apart from Leeds, Burnley, Sheffield United, I'd probably say Middlesbrough and maybe Norwich are the 2 after that with the best squads in the championship. No, Sunderland are up there, but in terms of pure quality and star quality at the moment, I'd probably say they're them 2, and maybe even West Brom and Sunderland in the mix are should be pushing the automatic teams, but they're fallen well short. And yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of gone stale.
You say about losing Latte-Lath, that they brought in, and I know I look at this through a biased perspective because I absolutely love
Iheanacho, yeah.
He is, well, this time last year he was on £80,000 a week. He's not, and I don't think he's taken a huge pay cut when he moved away from Sevilla. So they've got a striker that should be like really firing.
And what I've heard though is it's not been like a like for like replacement, because Latte-Lath is kind of mobile. He'll press. He'll kind of run in behind. Iheanacho looked unfit on Friday. He looked completely like
that's what I'm hearing as well.
He didn't want to move, basically, at points. He was jogging when he got the ball and had like 50 yards of space in front of him.
Like, when it's your team, it's fucking infuriating. But because I love Iheanacho, fair play to him. Go and get your bag, even if you ain't going to walk about.
No, but I have heard that Iheanacho certainly is not. Because if you look at it, I know it's not on paper, but on paper, Conway and Iheanacho should be more than good enough to get Middlesbrough into the top 6. But the problem with that is, as you say, if Iheanacho isn't fit, then how long is it going to take him to get up to speed? And by the time he gets up to speed, is the season already over? And that's if he gets up to speed as well. So, yeah, safe to say a big week ahead for Michael Carrick, that is for sure. And
the January sides haven't worked, have they, so far?
No, I think that's fair to say. I think that is absolutely fair to say. Right, well, there you go. But anyway, last thing, no, I think Annie's right in that Bristol City are definitely deservedly in the conversation now for the top 6, because, and the thing that's in their favour, and it's something that something that a lot of teams are having to show really, is that there's not a lot of, between the likes of 5th downwards to say 13th, 14th, whatever the hell it is, there's not a lot of consistency there. It seems to me like the form of a lot of teams seems to be win, draw, win, loss, loss, draw, win, draw, something like that. It's not very... The only team, I'm sure Ant's going to love this, but the only team that's really showing any consistency at the minute, like winning most weeks, is Coventry. So when we move on to the playoffs, we'll get around the other teams in the playoff picture. Let's start with Coventry, actually. So, now, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I know Ant's going to... I'm waiting for the little Ant Coventry digs in here somewhere, but I will get this. I'll say this right now. Coventry, the biggest the story for them is they finally beat Preston. I didn't realise how much of a bogey team Preston were for Coventry. Was it something like 16, 17 games or 20-odd games that Coventry...
22, I think.
Was that before the weekend? 22?
Yeah, so because I think Preston tweeted out, like, in the reverse fixture is 22 games unbeaten, so I think it was 22, yeah.
Wow, and I thought our record against Coventry was bad. Jesus. Well, all right then. So, well, there you go. The story of the day is that Coventry finally beats Preston. From all accounts, it sounded pretty dominant from Coventry, from what the EFL highlights were saying, and that from Coventry's point of view, this is the sort of game that you need to be winning if you're wanting to, with all due respect to Preston, if you're wanting to be pushing for the top six. But right, I'm going to ask Ant a question. Whether we're going to get how many funny comments we'll get, I have no idea. But
I'm going to be completely unbiased, as always.
okay, we'll see about that one. We'll see. If all else fails, I'll just ask Annie about this. But I have to say, to be fair, Frank Lampard's not doing too bad at the moment. Whether it's, I know it's obviously still early days to tell whether he'll be a success there, but can't ignore it. The last 8 or so games, he's won 7 of the last 8 or something, and the only defeat was to the best team in the league, basically.
Yeah, he started really well, hasn't he? And it's like looking at this completely unbiasedly. It's always difficult to come into a club when you've had a manager who's been as successful as Mark Robbins was. It's always like, and you saw it to start with Cov. A couple of their results to start with didn't quite go how Lampard would have hoped, and you started to see people saying straight away, "Oh, well, why have we got rid of Robbins? What was the point of that?" And it's like, it's very difficult to go into a club like that and win the fans over. And the fact that he's done that, I think that speaks volumes of the run that they're on at the moment. And obviously, where I live in between Cov and Leicester, I've got a fair few Cov mates. The positivity that they have at the moment, and understandably so, I think a huge amount of that has to come down to Lampard and the start that he's had.
Absolutely. No, and I think it's obviously, as was said, he's not even been there a few months yet, so longevity time will tell how successful he is going to be there. But safe to say for Lampard, for his managerial career, for me, as it comes across from the outside, is that he needs this job to work in order to, well, I guess restore his reputation a little bit more in terms of a manager. Like I said, I personally don't think he did a bad job at Everton, considering the circumstances there. As I said before, I think the first season at Chelsea, before he had money to spend, he did pretty well. But then once he had money to spend, it kind of went off on a cliff, really. But no, for this game, Jack Rodori and Brandon Thomas Asante scored a couple of goals. Ellis Sims had a couple of decent chances there. And obviously Coventry were in a comfortable position. And then Will Keane scores at the end. And I can imagine the Coventry fans are going, "Oh my God, we cannot beat Preston North End, can we? It's going to be 2-2, blah, blah, blah." But no, they ended up winning the game. And it is absolutely massive for them. And it puts them 1 point outside the top 6, which is fucking mental.
Did you see the first goal for Cov?
Yes, I did.
This is where my frustration comes with teams trying to play out from the back that clearly don't have the right players. It's like Preston caused them, as much as we want to credit Cov, and they do deserve the credit for it, Preston shoot themselves in the foot in this game. Make what's already a hard game a lot harder.
No, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that kind of annoys me because people seem to have this obsession with playing out from the back. And if you have the players to do it, that's fine. But my God, if you don't, then you're going to be sold up shit creek without a paddle, basically, as the phrase goes. Yeah. And the amount of times you try to pass the ball out from the back, if you get probably to some degree, that's probably, to go back to Middlesbrough quickly, that's probably what one of their downfalls is that they're Michael Carrick's so determined on his philosophy of playing out from the back and everything else. But the problem is, teams will know how to combat that and press you into mistakes. And if you're not able to deal with that, then it's not good enough, ultimately. That's the decisions they get paid for. But no, big win for Coventry. And you are right that when Frank Lampard's replacing someone with Mark Robbins' legacy, I guess, at Coventry, and bear in mind, a lot of Coventry fans did not agree with that decision to sack Mark Robbins. It was quite difficult for Lampard to come in, but it seems that so far, so good for him at the moment. To stick with Mark Robbins, because obviously his current team, Stoke, lost 4-2 away at another playoff hopeful in Norwich. Couple of really good goals in this one. Josh Sargent's, hang on, which was the goal that put them 3-0 up? Josh Sargent's second, I think it was. I can't remember. I think it was the goal that put them 3-1 up. That was a screamer in this game. Norwich scored a couple of decent goals, and it's kind of one where, although Lewis Baker scored to get Stoke level just before half-time, and also scored a penalty late on, which the game was done by then. For Norwich, games like this, again, with respect to Stoke, these are games that Norwich need to be winning if they're wanting to be pushing into the top 6.
Yeah, I mean, we rolled over Stoke fairly comfortably a couple of weeks ago, and for their perspective, it feels like it's just going to take a little bit of time to kind of gel properly under Robbins. Yeah, it's a good win for Norwich, and they're a good fun team, aren't they? With Sargent back, with Marcelo Nunez and Sainz obviously, and Sejanac, and some really good attacking players kind of littered throughout that squad. So they are a real threat to that top six, I would suggest, and look a real kind of just look a real contender for it. And they have similar to a lot of teams in the championship, a really good home record to back it up as well. So yeah, good win, and obviously having Josh Sargent, who is arguably the best striker in the division, it's just fit and firing. Is just, it does help with it. Having the most informed player in the division always helps. And yeah, him scoring twice. I think there was a bit of an injury scare for Sargent when he went off, when he went down with a knock, but he's okay, and yeah, just a win, just a kind of comfortable, nice win for Norwich, and that's 2-0. No, they drew at Hull. So after 3, I'd say, disappointing results for Norwich, the win against Stoke, and then going away to Blackburn, who are the team to catch at the moment in 6th, will be pretty big for both sides, I'm sure. And Norwich can close the gap to, I think, just 1 point if they go to Ewood and win. So a pretty big game for Norwich coming up. So good for them to go into it with a win.
Absolutely. Good to get a little bit of momentum and get a bit of form. I mean, it's one game, but get a bit of form back into it. You could say it's 2 games unbeaten now. Another team that is currently in the playoffs, as we mentioned, Blackburn being the team to catch in 6th for a lot of these teams, and we'll mention them in a minute. But first up, West Brom got back the winning ways. They got a 2-0 home win against Oxford at the Hawthorns. Alex Mowat puts West Brom ahead with almost kind of a classic Tony Mowbray style goal, where his teams, when they're on form, tend to score really good team goals with quick passing movements and are able to get forward, which is a good finish to go with it. But for me, the goal I always find the most comical is goals like this, when obviously Oxford, as you put, I don't know whether Annie will have seen this, whether I haven't seen it, I don't know. But basically, in the 101st minute, Oxford obviously are doing what you would do. You go you're 1-0 down with a few seconds to go. You push everyone, including the goalkeeper, forward. And it's always quite amusing when the team that's defending a lead wins a breakaway. West Brom do a quick little couple of passes, and then John Swift is on the end of a quick counter-attack and puts West Brom 2-0 up. But yeah, so far, first of all, as we've said before, it's good to see that Tony Mowbray is well, first and foremost, after everything he's been through, as I'm sure everyone will echo the sentiments. But from Oxford's point of view, it's not a disgraceful loss, because that's not the game that'll determine if they stay up, and they're still in a really good position. But from West Brom's point of view and for Tony Mowbray, not a bad weekend.
No, it's not, and it's like you say, it's a game if you want to be pushing for playoffs or in those.
It needs to be 3 points. Yeah,
you need to be winning. But I think, and I was talking to a lad who's a West Brom fan at a pub earlier today, and he was saying it wasn't just that they won, but they controlled the game for large parts of it, where I think Oxford didn't really, barring a couple of moments, look a threat at all.
No, and I think it's hard to get into this. This is where we're going to come across what we talked in the group chat. But when you're talking about what the budgets of different teams will have, it's like what West Brom had compared to Oxford had. Obviously, there's some element of expectation to that. But Oxford, as I said, under Gary Rowett, have not been a bad side at all. And yeah, maybe the honeymoon period might have gone out a little bit. But remember, a lot of these players have shown themselves up to be no mugs now, Oxford. And from West Brom's point of view, if you're controlling the game against a side that has generally been in form since Gary Rowett took charge, that is still quite encouraging. And I think with Tony Mowbray, it's going to be, obviously with Tony Mowbray going back to West Brom, it's where it's probably maybe aside from possibly Borough, it's the club where he's probably got the most amount of love from the supporters. Like, he's very well liked at Sunderland, for example, but I think West Brom and Borough probably maybe edge it just that little bit more so. But from West Brom's point of view, yep, absolutely amazing win. Amazing. It's just good to get yourself back in. I think West Brom are 5th now, last time I checked in the table. Okay, yeah, they are. I've seen it. 11 points behind Sunderland, who are in 4th. So, yeah, no, really good result for West Brom. Just good to get yourself right in there. And as I said before, if you could get yourself any semblance of consistency, you should get 5th or 6th, whichever one of these teams is in the chasing pack. Right, well, there was a couple more games that were involving teams chasing. Right, Okay, we'll talk about the next result. So this result that me and Annie were pretty happy with in the end. Swansea City 3, Blackburn Rovers 0. Yeah, Blackburn had won 2 games on the bounce going into this. And obviously the scoreline certainly wasn't what you would have expected before the game, but whether John Eustace leaving going to Derby will have a longer term effect on Blackburn remains to be seen. But you've got to credit Swansea here, Annie. 3-0 win against the side currently in the playoffs.
Yeah, and so much turbulence at Swansea as well. So to
just lost Luke Williams, yeah.
Yeah, just win is pretty well important considering their kind of precarious nature in the table. They're kind of on the brink of being dragged into a relegation battle, but they've got enough of a buffer so to win again as against a team in the top 6 is always important and always nice. And I think Swansea are where we are normally, where they're 10 points adrift the relegation zone, but they're 11 off the playoffs. So
mid-table mediocrity.
And so I think for Swansea, it's just about consolidating, maybe getting a new manager in that's going to have the rest of the season. So what will it be? 10, 11 games, depending on timing of the appointment. So I think for them, it's just about consolidating. They're in a nice position in the table in terms of relegation worries. And Xander Potnik scoring a really funny goal where Ainsley Pears, who's the goalkeeper, tries to kick it out instead of saving it and using his hands, which is remarkable and weird. Swansea 2-0 up at half time and Liam Cullen finishes it. Blackburn need a new manager, I think. David Lowe's done a good job in terms of taking 2 matches, getting 2 wins and 2 good wins. West Brom away is a massive result, 2-0. Plymouth at home is kind of everyone really beats Plymouth at home this season. So
we do.
It's
nearly everyone does. Everyone competent does.
Nearly everyone does.
Beat
Plymouth at home. So the overall form for Blackburn is not great, and the 2 wins in there are kind of a little bit of a flash in the pan. So even with John Eustace in charge. So they need a new manager, give them a bit of confidence, maybe a new message, and kind of help them in this playoff push because they are very vulnerable. Well, no one is comfortable in this playoff push. Put it this way, no one's got a buffer or anything. So it's if Blackburn get a new manager in, kind of solidify, start picking up points, go on a little bit of a run, they're probably in a good place to kind of make a real push for it. So they want a new manager in. Swansea want a new manager in. And they'll both kind of move on. But yeah, I think a telling result for Blackburn in terms of they can't just keep David Lowe for the rest of the season.
Well, I was going to mention a tweet. I can't remember who it was that put it in our group chat. It might have been, it was Carl who sent this in. Bear in mind, this is Alan Nixon, who tends to be a bit off sometimes in terms of accuracy, but I think it's an interesting point to bring up anyway. The Second Tier podcast basically quoted Alan Nixon, well, more or less quoted him, said Blackburn's pay deal is putting off many contenders for their new manager. They're offering around 12k a week, which isn't enough for some of the choices. Well, yeah, Andy's not wrong there in terms of what he's put there. But I thought it'd be an interesting point to bring up anyway. Let's put the caveat. If this is true, basically they're offering 12k a week for some of the choices that they want. If that's true, how crap's that from Blackburn's perspective, Anne? Bear in mind you're in the top 6 and you've got a chance to really kick on, and they're one of the bigger clubs in the league. And I suppose it comes down to one word: Venkies.
Yeah. Well, no, sorry. Is it that they're not? Because I've read it, and was it they're not paying their current players, or the players they're looking to bring in, they're not willing to go above 12k?
I don't know. Maybe it might be a case where they have a wage structure and they're not willing to go above a certain amount. But if that's the case, then you're not gonna hold on for players for much longer, are you?
Then to be honest, they're not. Yeah, as you say, and we're going to get into this a little bit later on. But ultimately, football more now than ever is you're paid to be where you are, and if you're not going to pay above 12k, then you're going to very quickly slide down that table.
I suppose the only good thing from Blackburn's point of view is they've already got past the 50-point mark, so if they get another few wins, if the worst does happen for them and they do slide down the league, then they're probably going to only need a couple more wins to make sure they don't go down at the very least. But given
But
how
that-
John Eustace has,
How
has
depressing is
started,
that, though?
oh no, absolutely. Like given how John Eustace has started the season, it shouldn't be in the conversation really. Yeah, Carl said mainly for the new manager wages. Yeah, I think that's what I read it as, that they're not willing to go above a certain amount for a new manager. And I've stood by that. I think it says a lot that Blackburn have lost John Eustace to a team that is currently 23rd in the Championship and is currently 4 points off safety at the moment. But time will tell on that one. But to go back to what Annie said, yes, both clubs, especially Blackburn at this point, need a manager. They need to appoint. Obviously, don't appoint someone for the hell of appointing someone. It's got to be someone who's actually competent. But yeah, as Anne said, that is depressing. And Ant will know, especially given my rants from Sunderland in the second half of last season when I went from, okay, well, come on, we can still get in the playoffs. And then I said, how many points do we need to avoid relegation? And that's how quickly the standards drop. So yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen for Blackburn.
It looks like it's well, these are reports. It looks like it's going to be one of Valerian Ishmael and David Wagner, who are the two leading candidates, which could be very interesting, very different managers. So it looks a bit like they don't really know what they're doing in terms of what profile they want. So yeah, will be fun. It'll be a fun one in terms of who they appoint.
David Wagner strikes me as a typical Venky's appointment. He actually didn't too bad. The thing is with Wagner in particular, he didn't do too badly for Norwich. It was just more that there was a lack of a distinct playing style, if you know what I mean. And I think a lot of it was they got in the playoffs, which he did well enough. But when you look at the quality Norwich had last season, it was pretty fair to expect them to be able to be in the playoffs. But no, for Blackburn and for Swansea, like I said, both need a new head coach. But we'll see what happens in the coming days with both. Another club that is now just about, I think, kept themselves in the playoff hunt, while at the same time potentially condemning their rivals to relegation, which happened at Vicarage Road today, was Watford 2, Luton Town 0. Who wants to go with this one? Should we start? We can either start by how good it is for Watford, but also how Luton could be the first team to do a Sunderland since Sunderland.
They are in big trouble, aren't they? They really are. It's strange. Like you look at that team. There's a lot of that team that was in the Premier League last year as well, but they. I didn't. I thought. Say that again.
No, I was just going to say, and the team that finished the highest out of the 3 promoted clubs last season as well, and gave it the best go to stay up.
To be fair, we'll get into this in a little bit later on when we talk about this. They were still comfortably relegated. Like Forest got a minus 6 points per deduction, and they were still comfortably relegated from that. But with Watford, did you see the little clip I put in the group chat of the Watford announcer saying about them climbing up the table, and it's still remaining very much the same at the bottom? I love that kind of stuff.
If you're a Watford fan, you're going to love that. Well, do you know what Watford fans will be doing right now? Taking in the sights. Anyone who knows the social media stuff around the reverse fixture will know what I'm on about. Yeah, that was quite a funny, I must admit. But quickly from Watford, they obviously got an early penalty with Dele Bashura. I always get that name mixed up. Dele Bashura obviously converted the penalty, dispatched it, and then Kayembe scored after a brilliant, amazing run from Chekvateze. I'm not even going to pronounce that. I'll let one of you guys correct me because I know I've got that wrong. But from Watford's point of view, it looked, from what I'm seeing here, it looked fairly comfortable. I think that Luton, but yeah, from Watford's point of view, it just about keeps their top 6 hopes alive. It keeps them 3 points off the playoffs. And again, we have to reiterate how good a job I think Tom Cleverley's done, given how, well, Watford's owners are probably the least patient owners ever in terms of hiring and firing head coaches. But yeah, I'll quickly talk about Luton for a second. Like, when you look at that squad, and I was just looking at the team that started today. Now, obviously you got Kaminski, who I believe played in the Premier League for Luton and generally did pretty well for them. Then you got Walters, Anderson and Bell at the back. But then you look at it, right? Asaya Jones, who hasn't been the most consistent for Borough, but is I would say is better than bottom 3 Championship player. Carlton Morris is still with them. You got Theo Asgard, obviously very highly rated from Wigan, but like a lot of clubs in the Championship wanted him. Alfie Doherty as well. Then you still had Adebayo. I don't know if he was on the bench. Was he? Yeah. Adebayo with it being on the bench as well. Like, there's really, for me, no way that Luton team should be anywhere near the bottom 3 in the league. But I wonder what What do you guys put that down to? Is it down to maybe that it's just a fractured relationship inside the club from the players to the owner? Is it the players to the fans connections gone? Is it just a mismatch altogether? What is it? Why are Luton struggling so much? Without the fact that you obviously aren't at the club, and if you had the answer, you'd probably be employed by Luton Town. But still,
I think it's one of those that it's not just one thing. I think that, like, yes, they got relegated last year, but they built very much with a team in theory that was going to bounce straight back up, and they brought championship players or players that thought they could do well in the championship. And I almost feel like there was an arrogance before they started that, yeah, that they're going to do really well. But also, and this is something that I saw on, I think it's HITC7, this is probably the first year for about 6 or 7 years that Luton aren't the underdog in a situation and there's an expectation around them.
yeah, I mentioned this to Carl and Annie at the start of the season, and I wondered how that mentality that mentality shift, how is that going to affect Luton? And I said that actually, I think that's one of the reasons. It sounds dismissive to say it, but it's a compliment. It's one of the reasons why Luton did so well, because they kind of thrived off the underdog mentality. You know, people doubting them, saying, "Oh, they'll not get the Prem, or they'll not do this, that, and the other," and they've generally exceeded at it so well. Whereas now, because now teams aren't treating against them like they're the underdog, that's going to be something they're going to have to get used to, Andy. And particularly if they go down to League One, they're going to have to get used to that, because teams will set up against them that way. If they're doing it in the Championship, it'll definitely happen in League One.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to summer, they barely signed anyone, didn't they? Where it was kind of go again with the same kind of similar squad. They lost Ogbene, they lost Osho,
Ross Barkley.
they lost Ross Barkley, obviously. Yeah, those were probably the kind of three big other players they lost. And obviously Tom Lockyer, which is a massive kind of obviously didn't
lost for different reasons. But
yeah, it's just kind of a big psychological blow, isn't it, to that group of players. But yeah, even though they were 18th, as Ant mentioned, there was kind of pretty scraping the bottom of the barrel with that kind of stuff, because they were so far adrift and they were so really, really poor. But did you really have any expectation? Was how much better were Luton going to do in the Premier League? It's not the conversation. They barely changed their squad. They signed the players they did sign in the summer, notably Liam Walsh and notably Shandon Baptiste. Shandon Baptiste has not been fit, so there goes one. He's started like 4 games. He's barely played for them, so there's one out the window. Liam Walsh has been both injured and been sent off twice, so he's not been kind of available for a large proportion of the season. Rob Edwards said at the start of the season that Luton were going to play this attacking style of football and going to attack teams in the Championship because they've got superior quality to a lot of teams, which is what you should do. But they didn't do that. They were insistent on playing one style of football. It wasn't working, and they didn't change it. He didn't change it, and Matt Bloomfield has come in, hasn't really changed it that much. It's not been like a drastic change in terms of they've changed the formation, and he's signed. He's been back from the January window with a couple of good signings from League One, but it felt like probably apart from Cal Naismith, it didn't feel like any of the signings were ready to go. Kind of these players are going to make an impact now. Milana Cowley, Tela Walsgaard, Lamine Fane, Lasse Nordas, good players. I'm sure for the future, young, good profile, but not going to make an impact now in the relegation battle. So that's probably been the biggest kind of concern and the biggest frustration and the biggest annoyance for Luton's fans, is that this has probably been the most avoidable thing in the history of avoidable things for them, because they could have just signed a relative decent amount of players, 5 players, 6 players in the window, and kind of had a bit of a refresh of the squad. They didn't do that, and the players they have signed, and kind of unfortunately, kind of not, because Shandon Baptiste has had an injury record and Liam Walsh has also had a torrid injury record. The 2 players that did sign, they've not adequately replaced the quality that they've let go. So yeah, they're bang in trouble. They're bang in trouble. This is no longer early season. We're 10 games in. They're bottom of the league. They'll be fine. We're 34 games in now. It's
now a conversation, isn't it? Yeah.
They've not won since December. not wanting to that's mental for a team of that quality. And that win against Derby was like quite fortunate as well. So you can't imagine it, right? Because this is quality squad for this division, and well,
Parachute payment team as well.
And again, Matt Bloomfield, I'm sure will be a good appointment in the long term. How much? But he hasn't got experience with coming in right now and making an impact. With his Wickham side, it was a longer term impact. They haven't got anything right now which convinces me. Okay, that's gonna change. So that's gonna change, and they're gonna start winning games. Nothing of that sort is convincing me or clearly Luton fans.
No, definitely not. Well, to be honest, when we keep talking about Middlesbrough not long ago, if Middlesbrough haven't won a game by the time they go to Luton, don't worry, Luton will probably end up giving you 3 points. But yeah, the fact we're talking about Luton like this is ridiculous. And if you look at their next game, they've got Portsmouth at home next Saturday, which is...
Massive.
I said that was about Plymouth. That was the relegation 6-pointer. And that was another thing. They took the lead against Plymouth in midweek, and then Plymouth, I think, apparently had like 3 shots on target all game and scored one of them. But that's a typical Luton thing, to find a way to drop points when the opposition barely has any chances.
Michael, they were so bad in that game. Like, I was hearing things about like there was an improved performance. They were horrendous. Like Plymouth are awful.
To be fair, though, maybe it could be that they were really fucking shit and they've just gone to fucking shit. Yeah. That is an improvement. Yeah. It's not a good standard, though, but it's an improvement.
Do you reckon, though, because I'm seeing it this year with Leicester, that like the players are better than what you're seeing, but they're in such a negative downward spiral now that it's almost
hard to get out of it.
It's like, what do you do to stop that kind of rut? And it's like, I almost feel like for Luton, they're in a similar situation and I hate always comparing it to Leicester, but it's because I've seen it firsthand of where we were in the Premier League the first time we got relegated, or first time in recent years where we got relegated, where they've got players that are very good players for the division, and if they do get relegated, they're probably not going to be at Luton next year anyway. So do you reckon there's a fair few of those that are sort of already know that and have thrown the towel in?
Kind of, but then I suppose as a supporter, I mean, I know players' mindsets are different to supporters, but that's something as a fan that would really annoy me because like, well, surely you want to do better for your own professional CV, really, and going that, you don't want to be part of the team that would took Luton down back to back from Premier League to League One. Yeah, getting relegated from the Premier League, that's a bit different because obviously we'll have the discussion about the gap later on. But for this season, there's really no excuse for me that Luton are where they are. And I know I keep comparing it to Sunderland, but it's fair because we are the last team to... unless Luton do want to dethrone us of that, the last team that went from Premier League to League One, I think, back to back in successive seasons. But the difference is at Sunderland, that was kind of... I still stand by that the team we had, as shit as it was, shouldn't really have gone down ahead of some of the teams that finished above us. But at the same time, we had a negative spiral that had constantly gone on for so many years and was building to the point where that's less of a surprise. With Luton, there wasn't really any of that. There wasn't really any of... If anything, it was an upward trajectory. And okay, they were well adrift in the Premier League, but let's be honest, Luton fans expected to get relegated realistically from the Premier League. I remember having a conversation with a Luton fan, was it last year, when I was doing an away game in London for Sunderland, and one of them said, I said to them, it looks to me like you've signed a bunch of players that should in theory be good to get you back up if you get relegated. And he agreed with me on that. That's one fan, and that's not the biggest problem. Just because one fan said it doesn't mean it's like, the God all and end all. But yeah. But to move on from Luton, from Watford's point of view, Annie, I mean, to get yourself back in the playoffs and to beat your fiercest rivals, they can't complain, can they?
Yeah, back-to-back wins is... Any team that puts back-to-back wins in this race is going to have a significant advantage. So, big win for them, and to do it in front of your home fans and Derby is always nice as well. So, a big win for Watford and for Tom Cleverley, must be said, who has had pressure on him. So to kind of relieve that a little bit is great for him. And yeah, 2 good wins as well. Away to Middlesbrough, not easy, and obviously the Derby game was looking. So yeah, 2 good wins for Watford, and put them right back in it, really.
Absolutely. Right, here's another game that involves a playoff contender versus a relegation battler. John Eustace's Derby homecoming, I guess, as a manager for them. They lost 1-0 to Millwall in I think it was the 95th minute, where but it was kind of dominated in the last 10 minutes with Josh Coburn when he misses a penalty, and then he ends up popping and scores later on anyway. So Go on then, Annie. The smirk on your face says you've got something to say. So go on then. Derby 0, Millwall 1.
Derby are so bad. Oh, God.
No beating on the bush. Derby are so
like,
bad.
I mean, I'm still kind of expecting. I'm sure a lot of people are still expecting a little bit of an upward trend because of Eustace, because he's a good manager, and that's independent of whether Derby are good or bad. Put it that way. But they're so bad. Like, there was a lot of heat when Paul Warne. I remember Paul Warne said after, they lost to Sheffield United, I think at home, but this is in the middle of their horrendous run, where he said this team and this squad is a League One squad with a bit of sugar on top, is what he said in his exact words. And I remember a lot of Derby fans going, "Oh, you can't be saying that. It's like this is your team. You built this. Well, this is a championship level squad. This should be surviving in the championship." He was not wrong. He was not wrong. This is dismal. Like an average team sees that game out and sees it 0-0. A good team probably wins that game 1-0 in a tight game. A bad team loses that in the 95th minute. This is what happens. Zetterstrom looks like Zetterstrom has bailed him out of jail in the 80-something relatively late on with a penalty save. It's a horrendous penalty by Josh Coburn, but all things considered, it's a penalty save. Zetterstrom. They look like they're going to get a point. Eustace is off the mark. Nope. Josh Coburn is there. He's a good striker. He's gonna score goals for you, and he put it in the back of the net. I mean, it doesn't help. Put it this way: any Derby fans watching, I know the injury problems are stupidly bad. Like Matt Clark went off injured. David Ozo went off injured. Matt Clark, who I think is one of 3 fit centre backs or 2 fit centre backs at the club, it went off with a hamstring injury, and David Ozo his injury looked bad, so they're going to be out. They're going to be without one of their starting midfielders. So they don't have a massive squad in the first place, and to have those injury problems is not great. They're still so bad. So they don't have enough. They've not scored in 7 league games at home in a row.
There's only one team in the country that can beat that stat. Record breakers.
Well, here's one for you. Do you know who their next home game is against?
Who?
The team John Eustace has just left.
Oh God!
Jeez.
They've got an away game at Middlesbrough next weekend, but they've got Blackburn at home after that. That is gonna be tasty.
And I don't mean this to sound, and I don't want to sound disrespectful to Derby fans, because they're obviously a massive club and they've got they shouldn't be in this situation. Like they are like, at least their minimum is like top end championship.
But he's gonna go, but they're just so bad.
It's just inconceivable. Like, how can you have Jerry Yates, Lasse Salveson, the Norwegian guy, Caden Jackson, Nathaniel Mendes-Lang, Kenzo Hoodmine, Marcus Harness, some really kind of talented, relatively talented championship kind of experienced players, and produce that level of attacking incompetence? It's just crazy. They don't look threatening. They don't look like they're going to score a goal. Every time they kind of go into a game, it's kind of very negative, very defensive, and that's fine. That's fine if you're 14th and you're trying to stay up, which is what they were doing. And once you go on like a 10, 15 game, whatever it is, 10, 11 game losing streak, you can't keep doing that once you're 3 points adrift, because you need to win. You need to start going into games trying to win them. They're not going to win. They've not been good away from home all season. Their home form has dropped off a cliff. I really struggled to see how Derby stay up, to be honest. And that's not been helped by their injury crisis.
So
I
basically,
hope you do, just so I've got another local game next season, more than anything. That's my only bias towards it.
You know what? Everything Annie has just said. Here's what you need to do: clip that, and then see if the Borough Breakdown podcast play that next week if it's Middlesbrough 0, Derby 1 at the minute side. Because that's just if they were playing Sunderland next, I'd be going, yep, that's got 1-0 Derby written all over it. So
thing is, they didn't even looking at the stats here. They didn't even have a shot on target.
think they
Haven't
hit
they
the
gone,
post.
haven't they
To
gone
be
through a
fair,
run of games where they've done that though, where they've barely had any shots on target in games?
Don't know.
I don't know. I'm sure I saw another game at least where they barely had a shot on target. Which,
I think they might have hit the post. To be fair, but still,
well, okay, yeah. But to be fair, then that doesn't
you
count as a shot on target. But yeah,
just
it's so
horrendous.
bad.
And to be fair, and I'm sure a lot of I'm sure Derby fans would agree with this. Some Derby fans agree with this. Is you're finding it so difficult to see where they're picking up their points from. And I really hope Derby do, because I want this kind of relegation battle to be nice and competitive. But you can kind of sense that if Luton don't pick up, if Luton continue this, and I just feel like Derby are going to get cut adrift just a little bit if they don't pick up sooner rather than later. Because I think John Eustace, I think we as well may have underestimated just the size of the job he has on his hands at Pride Park.
Either way, it's good. No, absolutely, it's going to be a massive challenge for him to keep Derby up. But it is still 4 points. The thing is, in that sort of position, a couple of wins changes the whole picture. But with the run Derby's on, the mental barrier of getting a win could be what potentially saves them. But it obviously, it just all depends. We'll wait and see what happens with that. To quickly touch on again more at the relegation battle, there was a relegation 6-pointer pretty much at the weekend, which was Plymouth versus Cardiff at Horne Park, and it finished 1-1. Cardiff took the lead with I'm not even going to hang on. Let me see if I can read the match report to get this name right. Yusuf Selek, that was it. Yeah, scored early on for Cardiff, and then in the second half, basically, who was it that got sent off? Dimitrios Gutas decided he fancied an early bath and then took down, I think it was Ballymumba, which resulted in a red card. And then Plymouth from there managed to get a point. Now, dare I say, this is probably still a better point for Cardiff than for Plymouth? Would that be
Probably.
fair? Yeah.
My only input on this is for Leicestershire Messi getting another assist for Cardiff. Apart from that, I have no input, didn't see the game, and don't know enough about it.
That's what we've got Annie for. He always bails us out. Go on.
I saw the Plymouth game at Kenilworth Road where they played Luton, and I said Luton were bad.
I was going to say, hang on. You said Luton are bad, then what are Plymouth?
God almighty, that was painful to watch. They've got two really good centre backs, Nikola Katic and Maxi Talaverov, and I love Maxi Talaverov because every time he wins a tackle, he kind of puffs his chest out and starts celebrating, even if they're 2-0 down away from home, which apparently he did at Blackburn, which is interesting. Victor Paulson's also in that back line. Tijani scored. Mohamed Tijani was it? Yeah, Mohamed Tijani scored when he came on.
Pronouncing names than I am.
To equalise. And I'm not being funny. In that game at Luton, every time the ball came anywhere near his kind of within a 5 centimetre, 5 yard radius of him, it just bounced straight off. How are you? He came on. Obviously, they're missing Ryan Hardy massively, and they're playing Mustafa Bunda up top, who is not really a natural kind of striker. He's more of a wide player. So I think that tells you all you need to know about Mohamed Tijani. But he scored. I haven't seen the goal, but I'm sure it was a horrendously non-aesthetically pleasing goal. Have you seen it, Michael?
Which goal are you talking about here?
The Plymouth goal.
Yes, it wasn't. From what I can remember, because all the highlights kind of blur in my head, I don't think it was a particularly great goal. Cardiff, I definitely remember that one, and that wasn't particularly good.
He didn't thunder it in from 30 yards, did he?
No. No, I'm pretty sure he didn't.
I'm really piling in on Paul Derby and Plymouth, aren't I? But yeah, they were not great. Again, I know they've picked up in recent weeks and 2 draws, but again, Luton away, they were kind of they were unconvincing, and I'm sure they really, really wanted to win this game. They set up for a point at Luton, which I found a little bit surprising because Luton are vulnerable, a little bit flaky, but obviously they had in mind this game at Home Park where they're much stronger and a much better side.
They're up against 10 men for 25 most of the
having
second
the man advantage. Yeah, having the man advantage, not capitalising, really, really disappointing for Argyle. And well, they've got a free hit next week, which is kind of a rest, kind of not. Well, it's not a rest because they got to play Man City away, which is fun. But then they've got to go to Hull, which is a pretty big game. So three consecutively games for Plymouth, which are well, nothing short of monumental for how their season's determined.
Well, here's another one, and for Cardiff's point of view as well, I suppose, even though you're in front in the game, in the end, to hold on and get a point away from home against a team that's below you, when you've got a game in hand over them, I think all things considered for Cardiff personally, I think it could be a lot worse for them. And bear in mind they've got their game in hand this week coming up. They've got Hull at the Cardiff City Stadium on Tuesday night. So if, say, for example, they get something against, if, say, for example, they win against Hull, psychologically it could be important because it could put them 6 points adrift to the bottom three. Equally, if they lose the game, then obviously it's as you were, and if they obviously draw, then it's a point extra further clear for them. But no, I would say in the grand scheme of things, definitely a better result for Cardiff than for Plymouth. All right, the last one before we talk about the sort of the two teams in the teams in the top four race that played. Portsmouth 2, QPR 1. Did you see Josh Murphy's goal? Stunner. Absolute stunner. They scored 2 quick-fire goals with the start of the second half with Josh Murphy and Matt Ritchie tapping in a pretty good cross from the left-hand side into close range. But to be fair, actually, QPR thought, hang on, you've scored one good goal. We'll match you that and score one. Jimmy Dunn, who I swear every time I look at a QPR result, Jimmy Dunn always seems to score for some reason. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how many goals. If he's not got at least 7 or 8 goals, I'll be surprised because I feel like I see him score every time. But no, first and foremost, obviously, look, no mean shakes for Pompey. This QPR obviously have been on a pretty good run in the last couple of months under Marty Cifuentes, and that result puts Portsmouth 9 points clear of the bottom three. I think it's safe to say that I spent pretty much half most of the season going, Portsmouth's home form determines if they'll stay up. Well, this is anything to go by. They'll stay up with flying colours.
Yeah, 3 wins in a row for Pompey, which is
great.
When it's a snail race at the bottom, 3 wins in a row, 2 wins in 3, 4 or 5 unbeaten. Kind of always important, always good, always big to contribute. Big towards contributing to safety. Christ, I can't speak. Jimmy Dunn has 5 goals this season, by the way.
5. That's still every time I look, he scores. Oh well, never mind.
Yeah, apparently first half wasn't like vintage stuff, but second half Pompey, as you mentioned, 2 quick fire goals and within 3 minutes of themselves, and they seem to have a bit of an injury crisis at centre back. So at the derby, Rob Atkinson, who is on loan from Bristol City, went off injured, which is a real shame because Atkinson's had it was Sunderland away, where he got an ACL injury and hasn't played in like 2 years approximately, and then he's gone on loan to Pompey to play. He's played regularly, and now he's got an injury. Hopefully, for his sake, that's not too bad. Regan Paul is back, and he's a good centre back. Obviously, no Connor Shaughnessy. He's injured for a number of weeks. And Hayden Matthews looked like he was running on concrete at the end of it. He was completely out, and he had to be kind of aided off the pitch at the end of the game. A bit of a warrior-like performance the last kind of 10 minutes of that for Pompey and Hayden Matthews. But yeah, just a massive win, massive win for Pompey, and 9 points, as you say. And with the pace of some of the teams at the bottom, and I know Hull won, and I know Cardiff and Plymouth both picked up points, and Oxford have been a good run. But it just feels like that's a bit of an insurmountable gap with 12 games to go for Pompey, and they're not safe, obviously not. But if they pick up points at a reasonable pace, they should be fine.
If they average pretty much a point a game, for example, for the last 12 games, they'll get up to past 50 points, and that I think you'd imagine that would probably be enough. I think probably.
I'd say at the pace it's going at the moment, Plymouth are on 30 out of 34 games.
45 points ish.
45 is fine.
You would think so because we're over 2/3 into the season now, aren't we? And I think if you look at it with if 3/4 into the season, the team that's 22nd on 30 points, then you imagine that they probably will be all right. I'll quickly mention this from QPR. QPR are kind of in the sort of Swansea sort of. Well, I guess you could say QPR are 7 points off the playoffs, so it's not insurmountable that they could get there, but I get the impression. I will say this for QPR and for Millwall, because I forgot to mention this in the last game we looked at. For both of them, they're still kind of just about in there in terms of the. I don't trust Anne's smile here. I don't know what he's typing, but no, I would say, the QPR and for Millwall, 6 and 7 points, I believe, respectively, off the playoffs. It's not insurmountable, but I still get the impression with both of them that it's going to be a pretty tricky ask. I don't know what you think.
No, I agree. I think it was really difficult for QPR because they went on a really, really good run, and after that, they've joined the mold in terms of they've been inconsistent again, like a lot of the teams, but because of where they were and the kind of the low base they started at, they needed a bit more. They needed a similar elk to a Coventry sort of run on top of the run they had before, if they were to challenge, if they were to mount a playoff push. And they got really close, didn't they? After they won at Hull 2-1, and they were like either in 7th or 8th and like really touching distance, but
Yeah.
it's just losing again. Here we go. Losing to Sheffield Wednesday, direct rival. Losing to Millwall, direct rival. Losing to Coventry, direct rival. Doesn't help. And I know they beat Blackburn in that run, but losing those games, those key head-to-heads, it's not gonna help at all. And every point in this race looks really, really important. So they've still got some really big games coming up. They've got to go to West Brom, Middlesbrough, and they've got to play us. They've got to play Preston. They've also got some really difficult games. They play Sunderland, they play Burnley, they play Leeds, Sheffield United as well in the next game. So I think it'll be hard for QPR to make up 7 points, especially with the traffic that's ahead of them.
Yeah, you need to finish above pretty much nearly half the league in order to probably get into the top 6 at this point. Right, let's get on to the 2 games. That sort of one that was on Friday night, and then I'll talk about the Sunderland game till last because I'm trying to put off talking about it as much as possible. But Friday night, Burnley 4, Sheffield Wednesday 0. Did either of you watch this game?
I watched bits and pieces of it from a concourse of the King Power after I went downstairs.
Oh, yeah, I forgot you were playing at the same time, weren't you? Do you know what, right? From what I was flicking back and forth between this and the Bristol City Borough game, and this is just typical. The things I accuse Sheffield United of in terms of performances, Burnley literally did this for about probably 45 minutes, where Sheffield Wednesday basically had 2 or 3 really good chances. But to be fair to Burnley, this is where I'll give them credit in terms of the clean sheets thing. Once Marcus Edwards put them in front, it felt for me like a completely sort of different task for Sheffield Wednesday. And up until the second goal, Sheffield Wednesday was still well within this game. But in the end, I think the quality in the end just tended to show. But I've got to say, first and foremost, Marcus Edwards is filthy at this level.
He's a level above the Championship.
Yeah, and it depresses me because it was us versus Burnley to get him. And of course, we're the ones that miss out on him. And I know the Scott Parker thing, yada, 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 but still. From Burnley's point of view, that's a cracking signing. And yeah, absolutely. When you're scoring goals like that, I think what Ant said's got a bit of validity to it. Scored an absolutely fantastic goal that sort of set Burnley on their way. And then I think particularly once Burnley went 2-0 up, in this game, thanks when Josh Brownhill scored, because he scored minutes after coming on, I believe. That pretty much just knocked the stuffing out of Sheffield Wednesday, didn't it? Which is a shame, really, because for the first hour, I thought Sheffield Wednesday were actually pretty good from what I watched of them.
It's one of those, when you're up against a top team like Burnley are, it's like if you don't take your chances, and it's such a cliche,
you get punished, don't you?
You get punished, and it's like if you go behind against Burnley, you're probably not going to be coming back against them, to be honest. Because as much as there's been criticised this year for being a bit boring, they are defensively so solid.
Here's one I'll talk about with you too. So, obviously, I mean, once we've talked about the Sunderland game, we'll talk about tomorrow night's game between Sheffield United and Leeds. And then we'll talk about the general topic we were going to discuss about the finances between Championship to Prem. But I get the impression for me, because I think I'm going to say this now as a neutral, after yesterday's result, I think we're kind of mathematically not out of it, but I think we're almost kind of out of the top 2 race. For me, I think it's going to be 2 of the top 3 to get into the top 2. But I'm very keen to see with Burnley because that goal difference I fancy ahead of Sheffield United's. I think they've got a 10-plus goal difference on Sheffield United. So if, say, Leeds won tomorrow night, it's 2 points between Burnley and Sheffield United. And Whereas I think Sheffield United are obviously really good at being street smart. Burnley's defence, I just wonder, in games where Burnley aren't great, the fact they don't concede immediately straight away gets them a point. And if they get a scrappy goal, then they're on their way to sort of really doing it. But yeah, when you've got players like Marcus Edwards, it certainly does help. But I'm fascinated to see how this top 2 race plays out now.
I didn't realise they've conceded 9 goals all season.
Oh yeah,
I knew it was a good defence, but Jesus Christ, like that is
isn't
like,
that one of the records? Isn't it some of the record for among the best defences in a league season in history or something? It's got to be.
It's comfortably the best defensive record in Europe, I think.
Unreal.
And they've kept 11 clean sheets in a row. Obviously, Marcus Edwards coming in means, and Manuel Benson scoring, which is just great because that bloke can hit a 25-yarder, and it's on his right foot as well, which is mental. And we said this at the start of the season where Burnley weren't quite like firing on full fronts. They haven't been firing recently anyway either. They've got good players in the attacking third. It's not like they've got bad players. It's not like they've got not enough quality. Marcus Edwards added into it. Jaden Anthony, Sarmiento, Manuel Benson, Zian Fleming, Ashley Barnes can be, Lyle Foster, Ashley Barnes can be added into that list as well. So we've got some really talented attacking players who are very much at the top of the division in terms of quality. So they've not got bad players. They've not got bad players in the attacking third. They've got really top end championship players. It just hasn't been clicking. I wonder if is this the moment where it clicks. We'll find out and see. But if they can keep clean sheets, as you said, Michael, if they can keep clean sheets, they're always in a chance of winning. But Sheffield United have been doing that all season, where they've kept it tight, been even game, and they win. That's what Sheffield United have been doing all season. So if Burnley can find that extra kind of a component of scoring goals, well, then they're going to be brutal. They're going to be ruthless, and they're going to be really well-oiled machine from now till the end of the season.
Do you know what I said last? Because I think, was it Leicester and Ipswich? I think they had something like 97 and 96 points, the top 2. And I said, there's no way it'll get anywhere close to that. I'm not so sure now. I'm really not so sure now, because if you look at it, say Sheffield United, for example, have to get to say 95 points, they need to win, what was it, like 8 in 13? Something like that. That's just over half your games. That's doable, I'd say. Then you've got Burnley, who could, and remember, the top 3 are either at or above 2 points per game. So, yeah, I still stand by that. I don't think the standard at the top this year is as good as what it was last year. But the points tally would suggested that I'm probably wrong on that.
This is just, and we'll get into this later, this just more and more backs up the point of the conversation of the teams that keep coming down or that are coming down are so much have such a clear advantage over everyone else, like head and shoulders over them. I say this now, and obviously I've experienced it myself, but I'm sure it will be for our benefit, Leicester's benefit next year. But it's just, that gap is ridiculous. But we'll get into it in a minute.
Yeah. Right. The last game, I suppose I'm going to try and keep about to a bare minimum. But Sunderland lost yesterday to Hull at the Stadium of Light, and to quote Annie, we were so bad. we were like really, really poor. I don't really like hammering players, but I can't not mention Anthony Patterson's howler for the Hull winning goal. I don't know if either of you, Annie probably, I'm guessing, will have seen it. I don't know whether Anne's seen it, but it is absolutely shocking. And for me, Anthony Patterson, to keep it brief, I think is a bang average championship keeper. I don't think he's any better than that. I don't think he's any worse than that. I think that in general, since he's come in from where we got promoted from League One, he's generally been pretty solid for us. But he's at fault for this. The balls, and it seems to me like Hull, Ruben Seller said apparently they were targeting Anthony Patterson from set pieces, which is a consistent thing that Patterson doesn't tend to command his box as much as you would like to see him do. But the ball literally comes towards Patterson's hands, and he somehow manages to fumble it and drop it, and then it basically bounces into the back of the net. And I thought Kyle Joseph had scored at first, but obviously it's a Patterson own goal, which is utterly mental. But I'm going to say this now. Yeah, yes, I can say Sunderland should have had a penalty late on because there was a lot of suggestions that we should have had. And I'm convinced, quickly to talk about the referees, I'm absolutely convinced that we are going to go through this season without getting a penalty for ourselves at home. I'm absolutely convinced at this point. But I'm not going to detract away from Hull. Hull absolutely deserved the 3 points. They were once they got in front, they did the dark arts superbly. They had the better chances on the break. They restricted Sunderland to creating, at best, half chances. I think there was one half chance from Isidore in the second half that you could argue we should have scored. And there was a chance when Mayenda came on, when he ran into the centre, towards the edge of the penalty area, where if he passes to, say, Patrick Roberts, or it might have been Joe Bellingham in the penalty area, we have a chance of scoring and levelling. But even that, for me, would have been harsh on Hull. I think Hull were actually really solid. And it's based on this, it's not hard to see why Hull are doing so well away from home compared to at home. If they could just sort their home form out, they'd be crystal clear of the bottom three, which is just stupidly ridiculous. But from Sunderland's point of view, it's back-to-back defeats now, and I wonder how much of, because we put in a lot of effort against Leeds on Monday night. Personally, for me, I don't think we deserve to get beaten that game, but it's one where that could take it out of you for the season. And I just think now, and I said beforehand that if we didn't win this game, I think we would be out of the top 2 race, and I'm standing by that. I think it's just going to be so difficult now. And again, it relates to the conversation we'll have later on, but the fact we've competed against parachute clubs for 2/3 of the season is or 3/4 of it, really, until this point, is probably a testament to how well we've done. But I still stand by what I've said. I think our team is good enough to win the playoffs if we go into it on the back of good form and we don't let our heads drop too much. And something I want to kind of quickly address is, because a lot of people say, well, yeah, Sunderland's got a young team. Yeah, but if you look at it this way, Patterson's made over 100 appearances at this point. Trey Hume has, Dennis Serkin has, Dan Neil has. Joe Bellingham, which is very freakish, yeah. He's not even 20 years old yet, and he's made 90, 100 appearances at this point. Chris Riggs made 50, but fair enough, that's his first full season. While this squad's among the youngest in the league, I do think it's definitely better than it showed yesterday. But look, to be fair, a home defeat probably was going to come at some point, and I think now we just need to make sure we get a good bit of form and try and at least secure 4th ahead of when we play Bristol City in May in the playoffs. So that's going to be a bundle of fun. What do you two think on this? Me personally, I think that's probably Sunderland out of it now, as in top 2.
Probably. I think if there were 3 teams, if it was like a top 3 with like 2 teams, and you were one of those 3, I think there's still a chance, because you don't know if the others are going to drop off. But you're hoping for 2 teams now to have.
You're asking for a lot, aren't you?
But it's like, also, I think it's not one that's worth losing your head over. I know it's frustrating, and like losing to a team near the bottom's not great, but you're still in such a good position, like for the playoffs, and it's one that like it's not, and particularly losing like that's never great. But I still think it's almost like take a step back and think like, look where you are at the moment. And I hate the expression, but you'll have bigger games at the end of the season, which will mean more, obviously, being the playoffs and potentially playoff final. So it's frustrating, but I wouldn't lose my shit over it.
Do you know, it'd be quite funny, because Ant's going to love this, but I've got in the back of my head that we're going to get fucking Coventry in the semi-finals, and I don't know why.
Get me a black and white shirt and a black and white scarf.
I'll get you a red and white one for Forest instead. Oh wait, they lost today. Never mind. Less said about that, the better. Yeah, no. Yeah. But I'm not going to take anything. I'll make this about Hull. That's a fantastic win for them. A win, the first team to give us a league home defeat this season. And I think if Hull can just get some level of consistency, they will more than fly up the league, I think, or at the very least should not get relegated. And for all I think, obviously, they were the masters of the dark arts, and I have my issues with time wasting. That's not Hull's problem. That's the referee for not stamping it out. And from Hull, cracking win. And if that doesn't give them belief for the relegation battle, then what is going to give them belief? Right. So we'll have Carl come on in a moment to join us for previewing only the top 2 in the Championship playing tomorrow night. You know, it's a pretty small game in the man's grand scheme of things, but Sheffield United versus Leeds United. I'll be keen to see how he feels about all this. Let's quickly he's got the table up now, I can see. So let's quickly look into this before we preview the game tomorrow. So obviously the top 2 still to play each other. Burnley on 68 points at 2 points per game in third, chasing down Sheffield United in second. Sunderland kind of in that 8 points off second, 11 points off fifth, and 12 points off seventh. You have West Brom and Blackburn making up the top 6, both on 51 points. Coventry, Bristol City, Watford, Norwich City, Millwall and Sheffield Wednesday all completing the top half. Laughably, with the squad they've got, Middlesbrough 13th, which is mental. QPR, Preston and Swansea all kind of in that sort of mid-table bracket. Portsmouth, of course, 9 points clear of the relegation battle in 17th. Oxford, who are still doing really well, 8 points clear in 18th. 19th is Stoke with 35 points. 20th Hull after that win yesterday on 33. Same with Cardiff when they're both to play each other in midweek. And then finally in the relegation zone, we have Plymouth on 30 points. 23rd, Derby County, who Annie says are so bad, on 29 points. And 24th, rocking it up is Luton, which you wouldn't have expected last May on 28 points. Right then, let's get Carl in. Let's see if we can... here he is to preview. Can't hear you, by the way.
I'm off views. It's, you know what? It's weird because
To
I'm
me,
doing the
oh, there we go. That's better.
And it's weird because I'm doing the production stuff. Yeah, I'm doing the view. But actually,
No, but you sounded like...
Yeah, it's meant to be better joining it, watching you guys do your thing. I just sit here, just drinking my water, just making sure everything goes smoothly. And then
Yeah,
I come on
absolutely.
to do pretty much the preview for tomorrow night.
So, well, let's get on to it tomorrow night. How's your feeling on it? Because obviously for you guys, us losing is good because it takes a team out of it for you, probably in the grand scheme of things for top two. So it's only really at least one team you have to finish above now for automatics. How do you feel about tomorrow night's game then?
Listen, it's going to be a huge game, and I think this is at least his last game playing against one of the top three teams now. For the rest of the season, we've got to play the other teams, including Bristol City, in the penultimate game before the end of the season. But I think looking at this now, I want to say a must-win game like it was against Sunderland. I think it's more bigger than that anyway, because I think it just shows who's got the quality to become champions now. I think that's what it's going to be, and I think, Sheffield United, despite their 2-point deduction, we'll be fighting against them pretty much. I know Burnley have played a part as well, but I think there's always that hatred between ourselves and the Blades completely, and especially with Chris Wilder. We know he doesn't like Sheffield. He hates Leeds quite much, so we just want to see him be miserable again tomorrow night to get the 3 points, the little double, because especially after I think it was 2018, 2019, he said some comments about Leeds about being so mungy and all that stuff, and they kind of bite back in the ass when we get to the Premier League and we actually relegated in a way, to be quite honest here. But I think this is going to be a big game, especially it's a Yorkshire derby. It's huge. It's really huge, and to play these Monday night games back to back, it can be tough. I'm glad we won't have to do that as much now going after this. So hopefully there won't be a lot of fixtures keep moving about. I know Easter's going to be different. Their fixtures will be moved around for TV, but we just want to make sure we keep consistent away from home. That's the main critical point.
Yeah, I would say that this is probably, in terms of just coming up against league position, this is your biggest game left of the season. Being captain, obvious there, I know, but I wanted to get Ant and Annie's perspectives on this. How big is this for both teams, not just for them, but in terms of whoever wins if say Leeds win this, they go 7 points clear of third, 5 points clear of 5 points clear of second. But at the same time for Sheffield United, if they manage to get a result, it's massive for them as well.
I think it's huge for both teams in both ways, but I think if Leeds win it, then they've got 1 foot as champions, and I think regardless, I think they'll go up. But you've got 1 foot one hand on the trophy. If not, everyone and obviously Burnley and Sheffield United they're still within touching distance, and it doesn't leave you sort of much room to have a bit of a wobble. So it's one that I think, in case you do have a wobble towards the end of the season, you almost need to win in that sense.
Annie?
I think a draw is not a disaster for either side. I think it keeps Burnley at arm's length for Sheffield United, and Leeds kind of just keeping, draw away at Bramall Lane. Not a bad result at all. So, I'd probably say I wouldn't be surprised if it was cagey, and if it was level with 20 minutes to go, I wouldn't be surprised if both sides kind of went, right, well, stop playing. we'll take that there. We'll take that right there and then. So it'll be interesting to see how the game goes. It feels like a bigger game for Sheffield United than it does Leeds because of the fact that they're at home. Obviously, the pressure was put on them with Burnley winning. Sunderland a little bit in the background for the moment, but their form's been much better. They've won 4 in a row recently, so a win for Sheffield United would be humongous and a massive hammer blow for Burnley, because I'm sure Burnley would like to win the title, but at the moment it's about the immediate team above them. So if Sheffield United were to win, go 5 points clear again of Burnley, it would be a bit of a deflating result for them, I'm sure, because I think Sheffield United that would be their last head to head as well. So no, they've still got to go to Turf Moor, which is on the second last day of the season, which will be interesting. But yeah, for Sheffield United, if it's a bigger game for them, I feel.
Yeah, I think the criticism I've always levied against Sheffield United, it's not the one. Obviously, I've been quite critical of their I've been quite critical of their performances this season. But if I was to take a step back and look at it as a neutral, the only area I think they could probably improve, because they are very, very good at shutting the opposition down at the worst of times, and when they're not playing, like the Luton game was a prime example of that, where Luton apparently battered them first half, but they stayed in it, switched it up, and were able to win it later on. One thing I would say is that their record against sides around them hasn't been particularly good. They've beaten, so if you look just at the same, I'll include Sunderland in this for the sake of argument for a moment. Or let's look at the top six. They won away at Blackburn, fair enough, that's a good result. They beat Sunderland at home, that's fair enough. But then they didn't beat West Brom twice, they drew, lost at home to Burnley, lost away at Sunderland, lost away at Leeds. So I get the impression with Sheffield United, I think if it's a draw, it's probably a good result now for either side, really. And I think it'd probably be slightly better for Leeds in the sense that at least it puts them 5 points clear. Well, effectively 6 points clear of third with goal difference. So I'm really fascinated to see how this is going to pan out. But I think I'll say if Leeds play for me the way they did at Ellen Road against Sheffield United, and that was before you had Gruev and Ampadu, correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, that was when they were out.
Yeah.
You still dominated and battered Sheffield United. And if it had been 5-6-0, it wouldn't have been a complaint so much. And I think Andy's right. I think if you're a Burnley fan, you either want a draw or a Leeds win, I would imagine. Because, if Sheffield United win, then all of a sudden you're still effectively 5 points behind second, which can be overturned, obviously. But I'm fascinated to see how this is going to play out. I'm really fascinated to see how it's going to play out. If I had to push you guys for a prediction before we go into our main conversation about the financial stuff, who do you reckon's getting top two here? Because I keep saying Leeds, and then I keep changing my mind between Sheffield United and Burnley all the time. I think Leeds will be one of them. I'm just undecided on who the other one's going to be.
I think Burnley and Leeds.
I think it will be Sheffield United and Leeds as champions, probably.
I thought it was going to be different and say Sheffield United and Burnley for a second. No, not quite. I think it'll be Leeds and... Okay, Burnley. I'll say Leeds and Burnley. I had said Leeds and Sheffield United until this point, but I don't know. Friday night kind of made me think about how this can change so much. But all right then, Carl, I'll ask you then. I'm not going to exclude you from this. Who do you think is going to be in the top two?
Will be us completely. I think compared to where we were last season. Sorry, I know we overhyped when we beat you guys and look how that turned out. I think it will be us. I feel like Burnley could get it because if that goal, if they can not concede, if they stay under 20 goals not concede more than 20 goals, the next 10 goals by the end of the season, at least round about under 20 goals to concede against. Yeah. I'll be amazed if they do that and they actually get promoted because I think that defense that their back four is formidable.
Yeah, I think it is as well, and I think it's one when you look at some of the chances Sheffield Wednesday the other night created, and then straight away, like a flash, Egan Riley or Estefi was in the middle of it, and you can see why they had that sort of defensive sort of shape and defensive record. But yeah, no, I'm fascinated to see how it turns out. Right, one of the things we were going to talk about, unless anyone's got any more things to add on the sort of top end of the championship. No, it's fair enough.
I've got to go. I was really looking forward to the conversation, but it's 9:30, so I'm going to call it there. Not had dinner yet.
Andy, we can have this debate. Well, us will stay on, but because at some point at the end of the season, I am going to talk to everyone about the gap at some of the finances.
So we can revisit this anyway, can't we?
Yeah.
We can still talk about it tonight and talk about it again.
It's going to be a big discussion between not just you guys, but with Doug and probably Reese from the World Football Podcast and a few others, and Nathan and Chris from Lesson to Die, and even so, I think this is going to be a big discussion some point towards the end of the season. We'll do our review.
Yeah.
No, fair enough, champion. Well,
right. Catch you all soon. See you next week.
Catch you in a
Bye.
bit, mate. Right, well, so now we're talking about the clubs that could have a chance of going. No, I'm joking. Bristol City are still right in there. Yeah, the conversation we were going to talk about. If you're still watching, and I think Doug's in the comments.
He was in the comments.
I don't know whether he's still
he's
there.
been in and out, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, Doug, if you're there. Good. I think they won at Man City today, Liverpool, didn't they?
Did. And
Good,
you know what? It's not a surprise they're now lowering points. And also another thing as well, too, as I did notice, Philip Clement has been sacked by Rangers. That has just been confirmed by the club. That's been some time coming for me.
It's
been coming for a while, and I think when you're 13 points behind Celtic and you've only won, I think Rangers have won at least 3 trophies at the last 5 years. It's not good enough, and
no, it's not.
I can see the players have given up on him. The energy's gone. I could see it for a while. The way they lost in the Scottish Cup to Queen's Park, who had one shot on target and scored a winner. You can't.
It's not good enough for a club like Rangers, is it?
Yeah.
No. Well, either way, okay. Well, that's going to be a bit of big news up in the SPL. But the conversation we were going to talk about, and actually was an interesting discussion here because we were talking about the gap between the Championship and the Premier League. Now, originally, a couple of years ago, when we got promoted into the Championship, I felt the gap between the Championship and League One was the biggest. Oh boy, was I wrong! And I think Ant's obviously probably in a good place to talk about this. Well, not so much for your own mental perspective with how Leicester are doing.
I mentally zoned out weeks ago, mate. Okay,
well, fair enough then. All right,
then. If this was about probably around Christmas time, I think I'll probably be a bit more ranty and angry now. I'm just mentally zoned out. And
well, okay then. Let's talk about Leicester and Leeds for a minute then. So there's obviously, this is not sounding as a dig to Ant, even though it's going to sound like it. There is the possibility that you two swap divisions for next season, and that Leeds will be in the Prem and Leicester. I mean, now by the way, announced Leicester start to turn into Liverpool this season and start to win nearly every game and then finish 17th. Who knows? But
it's a high probability, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I think there's more chance that Leeds don't get promoted than there is that Leicester stay up, and I'm very confident Leeds are going to get promoted.
Yeah, I get you. I think unfortunately for you guys, I think I probably would agree at this point, but I found it interesting to see what you think, Ant, because obviously because Leicester, forget the fact that Ipswich finished 1 point behind you. That was because you basically had probably partied and had a sort of took the eye off the ball a little bit because you basically been up for months. So you kind of pissed the Championship for most of the season. And then you look at Ipswich, how well they've done. Southampton obviously won the 2 of the parachute teams went straight back up last season. And yet then look at how Southampton are doing, look at how Ipswich and Leicester are doing. What's going on in terms of the gap between the Championship and the Premier League? Because it's something that Leeds will potentially, and selfishly, I'm still hoping Sunderland subjectively have to look forward to next season to some degree, but I'm well aware that the gap is fucking huge. Even if you look at, say, the gap between the bottom 3 and, say, Wolves in 17th, I think it is. It's getting mental.
It is absolutely huge. There's no getting away from that. And I think all the teams in the Premier League now have been quite established for a few years. There's no one that's only just come up apart from the newly promoted teams. And when you look at some of the players last year, I think out of all 3 of the best players in the league last year, because it was Dewsbury Hall, Adam Armstrong, and Somerville were the top 3 players who were nominated for Player of the Season. Not one of them has cut it at Premier League level yet.
No.
Has Somerville played much for West Ham?
He's been part and parcel. He was a bit more under Lopetegui. I don't know much about if he's been a bit more under with Potter, but he's been in and out mostly.
But all 3 of those players were by far the best, and you could see a real level of quality of them in the Championship. Not one of them has managed to make anything of themselves in the Premier League. And I know Somerville's still young, and I do actually think that he will over time. But it just shows the fact that he can barely get a kick for West Ham, and he was the best player in the Championship last year.
Yeah, he's only had 19 games this season. So,
and I think a huge amount of those are sub appearances as well.
Yeah.
I think another one to point out, when you mentioned Adam Armstrong as one of the best, where's he at now? He's back in the Championship with West Brom, isn't he?
Yeah, and he was one of the best strikers in the Championship last year. You look at Vardy as well. Vardy last year, 20 goals, I believe it was?
Yeah.
Something like that.
I think he's got 6 in the Premier League this year. and he's our penalty taker as well. Who else? Like Sammy Smodics as well, flying at black. Like, there's always going to be this gap in between the Championship and the Premier League. I think that's natural because it's a division above. But I think it's the level of the gap has never been so big. And then what that means as well, though, is so when the three that have gone up are going to come back down, we will probably all three of us will either have the best squad in the Championship if we don't sell any assets, or if we sell assets, we'll be able to sell them for a lot more than any of the other clubs in the Championship will ever be able to spend naturally.
Combined, yeah.
And then buy another, and then basically buy our way out of the Championship. Because from a Leicester perspective, we're probably going to get about £60 million worth of player sales. Like, compare that to a non-parachute, like a team that's not just been relegated, plus the fact we're going to have parachute payments on top of that. It's like the gap is ridiculous because that we probably could build £100 million team in the summer, and it's like that shouldn't be the case. And I know that that's going to massively benefit us, but then it's going to be you're going to have this revolving door of about the same 6 to 8 teams that will be going up and down and just swapping past each other season after season.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where it's getting like to be a real problem, and if anything, it kind of highlights just how well Ipswich did, for example, last season. Because I actually looked this up, right, I think it was since the lockdown season, so 2020 to 2021, when we all obviously couldn't go to games. Since then, if I'm right, I believe that the top 2 in the last 4 seasons, apart from Ipswich, have all been parachute clubs. Every single one of them. So in 2020, 2021, Norwich and Watford, who both got relegated the previous season, were the top 2. 2021-22, there's a pattern here. Fulham and Bournemouth. Bournemouth, who I believe at that point, if you're in the Premier League for 1 year and you come back down, you have like 2 or 3 years of parachute payments. So
It's
Fulham
it's 2 seasons of parachute payments where you come back down the first season. If you stayed up for beyond after the first season, it's free. It's 3 years at least.
Right, fair enough. I had heard that, but thanks for correcting me on that. I think so. But the example is Fulham and Bournemouth in 21-22 were the top 2. Fulham, who I believe had come down the year before. I think I'm right in saying that.
Yeah, the year
And
before, and then Bournemouth was.
And Bournemouth was their second year in the Championship, wasn't it? So,
Yeah.
so there's that one. Then in 22-23, obviously Burnley and Sheffield United. Sheffield United again, their second year, so they still had parachute payments. Burnley, their first year, both comfortably pissed the top 2. They absolutely walked it. And then obviously last season you had Leicester and Ipswich. Now, even then, if you expand to the top 4 last year, 3 of the top 4 were the relegated teams and were miles ahead of everyone else. If I'm right in thinking, looking at the table, I believe if I'm right, Southampton finished in 4th, were on 87 points, and West Brom in 5th were on 75, I think.
Yeah.
I know. When we played West Brom, I believe there was a 20-point gap, and it was one of our latter games of the season.
It was around, it was roughly around that points gap.
Yeah.
It was quite a lot. It was in its 15-20 mark. Yeah.
And it just, for me, it's like then you see these teams going up to the Premier League, and like we talk about how well Luton did, they were comfortably relegated. It wasn't, they were the best of the bunch last time. They were comfortably relegated. I think they finished 6 points behind Forest, but Forest had a 6 points deduction. So really, the closest team was a 12-point haul away from staying up. And then you look at the teams that below them. So Sheffield United and Burnley, 2 teams that were absolutely nowhere near good enough in the Premier League last season.
Yeah.
And there's a very realistic chance both of them could be going back up first time.
Yeah. So pretty much I'm looking on here, probably I'm looking at where the last team, which were 2 teams that never went to the Premier League, didn't have any parachute players when they got relegated back down, who did get relegated. QPR was one of them because I know they got relegated and they got back up after the season as well. So yeah, I can't think of the last team that's done it to get back up who got relegated. I just not gone back up. The only team I can think of is Huddersfield Town. They're the only team that's not gone back up to the Premier League, and they're in League One.
And that feels like almost a different era because the money now compared to the money then is 2 different worlds.
Yeah, I agree with that. But like I said, when Huddersfield got relegated in 2017, 2018, 2019, yeah, they were the only team. The only team since then have not gone back up. after they got their parachute payments. I can't think of anyone else. I will say for Middlesbrough as well too. Middlesbrough is one of them as well.
Is that 16, 17?
Yeah.
With Swansea, isn't it, as well?
With Swansea, yeah. So
Cardiff.
Swansea's the same as well. Yeah.
But it's mad though, isn't it? Now 2 seasons in a row we've had 2 teams or 2 sets of clubs that have gone up from a championship. I don't want to say relatively easily, but whilst being comfortably better than the rest of the division, and 2 seasons in a row, all 3 of the clubs that have gone up have been pretty much relegated before the start of March.
Yeah, and that's quite concerning because obviously last season you had Burnley, Sheffield United, and Luton well adrift or well in the bottom 3, and then it's the promoted clubs this season. The problem you're going to have is, and I guess as a fan, it kind of, and this is interesting from my perspective because obviously Sunderland have been out of the Premier League for 8 seasons now. For a club of our size, that should be unheard of really in our history, but obviously 4 of them were in fucking League One, but let's forget about that. Either way, but part of me thinks that if, let's say Sunderland did somehow win the playoffs, right, as a non-parachute team, part of me would be looking forward to who we could attract, because I do think our recruitment in general is pretty good, but I'm thinking, fuck. If we don't spend, then we are screwed. And even then, even if we do spend, there's a high probability we go back down anyway. So as a fan, it kind of makes you think, what's the point in getting promoted? I know financially why there is a point to it, because even if you go up and come back down, the landscape in the championship's different then. You're then well ahead of everyone else. You're a parachute team. You can afford to spend. Like Sheffield United and Sunderland, for example, we both went for Tom Cannon in January, right? Sheffield United can go, no problem, 10 million quid. Like, we as a non-parachute team, we can't compete with that. It's absolutely mental. But in the Premier League, if you go up and you're going to be comfortably behind the division, then as a fan, you feel, what's the point to it?
Yeah, and it's like you say about 10 million quid, and I know I keep referring to Leicester, and I don't want to.
Well, to be fair, I did because obviously you sold them to Sheffield United. So
it's like when we initially brought Tom Cannon,
yeah,
the first time we didn't need him. That was just to stop other teams buying him.
It was like your insurance policy. If
that was what you said at the time, man, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, as much as that's benefited us, that can't be the way forward.
This is the problem, and it feels like the system's broken now. And you remember this, and I remember I put it in the chat, and I was half joking, but I was half being serious when you're looking at that Super League that was suggested or formed like a few years ago. That was a real possibility that was going to happen, and it got scoffed at the time. But the only way for me that the Prem seems is going that more teams from the EFL are going to close the gap is if you have the elite teams go off and join a Super League, and then all of a sudden you get 3 extra teams that are able to come up to the Premier League, and then. But even Carl, you mentioned the National League, didn't you? Like,
I mentioned the National. So the National Leagues are going through a situation that they're not happy with. When only 2 teams can go up from to League 2. So the problem is they have it at the moment. So they'll be fighting to try to get an extra promotion spot to have to have 3 teams go down from League 2 and 3 teams to go up from the National League, because there's so much good teams in the National League who have who fight every year and missing out. So the problem is now, we said earlier today, we said that because of the FFP rules in League 1 and League 2 is now not restricted.
Non-existent, really, isn't it?
Now. The problem is the gap is widening between the Championship and the EFL club, in the EFL League 1, League 2 clubs. And the thing is, I think National League clubs are now having a bit more money. They're trying to, to try to put money in their club and try to get them promoted. Some of the other teams are not doing it. So the problem is, at the moment, we are in a situation where a couple of years ago they will talk about an English football reorganisation. That never happened. Then we had the Project Big Picture, when it was all going to be the top big 6 Premier League clubs were going to have more voting rights than the other 14 clubs. Then we had the European Super League, which was scrapped. It's still at some point they still want to do it. But the thing is, we have the Football Governance Bill coming by the UK government that wants to actually in the law, they are going to curb English and Welsh clubs participating in the European Super League if there was a breakaway at some point again.
Do you know another problem that we're... Sorry, Grant, go on. You were going to say something, I think.
Sorry, go on, mate. You go.
No, my point was something completely different. So if it was a segue, then go for it.
I was going to say, it feels as well, it's becoming like there's always been, obviously, as you filter down the football pyramid, there's more money at the top and less at the bottom. But it just feels it's so much more at the top, and it's Have you seen the meme of where it's like there's the rich bloke at the top, and it's literally everyone else has just got a few raindrops. It literally feels like it's not being distributed far enough down the pyramid and evenly enough down the pyramid. And I think now it's only really been like highlighted as much because it's the two top divisions, but it's been getting worse and worse across multiple divisions for years.
Well, that I was going to say. Well, my point was relevant to like the lower divisions because I mentioned about the Jay Stansfield saga to Birmingham in our group chat earlier. But let's look at it first. So, say for example, you had a club, and the problem is some clubs. Well, but let's say take out the parachute clubs. Right? Say for example, a club like Sunderland or Middlesbrough or Birmingham should be able will naturally be able to spend more than a Crawley or a Bristol Rovers or a Carlisle or something. Just random clubs off the top of my head. But this is how screwed up the pyramid is now. Birmingham, weirdly, going down to League One, as I mentioned to you before, but obviously people watching weren't privy to this. That probably enabled them to sign Jay Stansfield.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the financial fair play restrictions in the Championship, there's no way Birmingham should have been able to get away with that in the Championship. So they might think, well, okay, we'll sign Jay Stansfield. We'll get him on a 7-year contract, I think they sign him on. Spent around 15 million quid, maybe even a bit more than that, to be totally honest. They sign him, and then that relegation to League One has secured Jay Stansfield for the foreseeable future for another 6 years after this season. And if they stayed up, they probably wouldn't have been able to sign him because of the finances involved. So, with the fact, and obviously remember when we were in League One, there was obviously that thing about the salary cap as well.
Yeah.
And that was also, and I got the principle behind it in that was done in an attempt to level the playing field. The problem you've got is, why should a club like, say, us, when we were in there, who naturally have a bigger fan base and get bigger, gate receipts, even in the lockdown season, have more people paying for iFollow, should have to only be able to spend as much as Burton Albion, But obviously, in some ways you could say that isn't fair in itself. But to make the point Ant was making about the money being distributed down through the EFL for a club like Bristol Rovers or Burton, for example, if you're distributing these funds more evenly, how much that could be massive for clubs like that. That could be massive for clubs like Birmingham. Sorry, for for Burton Albion. It could be massive for clubs like Morecambe, Accrington Stanley, Doncaster Rovers, whoever else it is. But this comes back to the same problem, and it feels like the bigger the gap's getting for the Premier League, and the less fair that it's going to be for a lot of people. It feels like because for a lot of clubs and for owners, the goal is to get the Premier League. And even for 1 year in the Premier League, you could get more money for that than you probably do for winning the Bundesliga, than what Bayern Munich do for that, or from Madrid or Barcelona or Atletico Madrid winning La Liga. I mean, I might be way off with that, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. That you could get more money just by being crap in the Prem for a year.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm pretty sure that there are clubs in the Championship even that will be able to spend more than some clubs abroad. It's getting ridiculous now. I know I've said that about 5 times, but it really is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, and it feels like as well, some things you can see sort of how there can be a solution. I don't see how there can with this because it just feels
Yeah.
it's a fire that's just growing and growing and growing, but you can't put out.
No, there's not going to be any solutions. I think it's not going to rectify this straight away. It's good. I think we've gone way beyond it now, and it's like what I said to you guys earlier in the group chat. Where I look at how Celtic Rangers have dominated. Rangers have made a near £20 million loss in the last financial year, and they just sacked their manager. And then now the 49ers enterprise that owns Leeds United wants to buy Rangers. That sounds like So there's been talks about, because I think with Hearts I think Hearts and Celtic were the only few teams in the Scottish Professional Football League pyramid made probably a good profit, because Hearts has been owned by the Foundation Hearts fan club, and you got Celtic, it's still owned by the billionaire, but it's still because of the money they get for the Champions League and the European stuff. But what's going on with the Rangers situation? Theirs is different because they've operated at a loss for quite a bit, and I think even though we've seen Bill Foley with his Black Knight investment investing in Hibs in a minor stake, and so the thing is that the problem is right now you can't, with Celtic's squad you can't compete because Celtic can afford the wage and stuff. Where Hearts have not spent over a player for over £1 million in for a long, long time. They haven't, and not since after they got to the administration. So it is actually been. It's the way things are now. It's it has been, I don't think Hearts will. If Hearts did get, the investment from Brighton, from what I've been hearing with Tony Boom, then there's a chance that they could able to get a player around £1 million, but they can't. We can't spend that. Not like what Celtic and Rangers can do every single 2 windows.
No, and it's like the longer the dominance goes on, the harder it's going to get to break. And it's, as you say, it's been since the 80s, hasn't it? And so it's just, yeah, it feels like it's not just an English football problem. It feels like there's multiple leagues, and
mainly in Europe. I know in
Yeah.
Argentina that's been a lot worse, but I know in the US that's different. But it's mainly in Europe and South America have been having issues actually now, and we've seen it as a big issue.
It's interesting because I was talking on a stream, and it's with a Porto fan, and they said in Portugal they've basically got a top 3 that are absolutely untouchable.
Yeah.
And then anyone else, like even decently sized clubs over there, like Braga, just financially cannot compete with them. And it's like that. There's obviously the natural football food chain, and I think we all understand that. But it's having that ability to compete and having certain things that just feel like they're now becoming glass ceilings, where however well you do, you're not going to go through that glass ceiling.
I think to touch on something that Carl mentioned about Celtic and Rangers, there's an example really when, although Celtic and Rangers are on TV a lot, like obviously because they're by far the two big, they're by far the 2 biggest clubs in the league.
And also, here's the thing: when they go to away games, they do fill up probably like 3 corners or 3 stands completely because not all fans. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that when they've gone to somewhere like Livingston, for example, Livingston, I think I can't remember if it's the right club I'm talking about here.
No,
but
it's Livingston because Doug is a Livingston fan, and he's told me that the way I've noticed that where the home fans they sit in the one stand, which is where the dugout is, all the other 2 or 3 is completely
Yeah, so it's just like, oh, here you go, Celtic Rangers, just take the... Which I get it from their perspective. If you're not going to fill out the ground from... I sound like a mag here, a Newcastle fan talking about attendances here. But when you're talking about the home fans going to games, like, if you're not going to be able to fill out the stadium as much, you might as well give it to the opposition if you're going to make more money, aren't you? But, again...
Try this.
Sorry?
Kov should try this.
There we go. I was waiting for
I've done well. It's got nearly 2 hours.
1 hour and 52 minutes or so before you had a cough.
Yeah,
So you've actually, I'm proud of you. You've done pretty well. But it's even joking aside. When you look at Celtic and Rangers, they're on TV a lot. But I'd imagine that the money they get compared to, say, the Prem deal, or even to an extent the EFL TV deal, I can imagine by comparison it would probably be pale. It certainly wouldn't be anywhere near as much.
It's pale because of when Santanta Sports was actually the biggest TV, by the time, and then got collapsed after what with the Premier League. The Scottish clubs were in financial dire, and Deloitte did an investigation on it years ago, and they said majority of the clubs are in suture, except barring Rangers and Celtic. And since there, because they don't show a lot of Scottish games on Sky, I think they've had to do a new deal to extend to more games. And also now Premier Sports are now coming to play to put like 10 extra games. I think up to 10, 15 extra games probably per season. The problem is when you've had a long time chief executive who's been there for a long time, like Neil Doncaster, he's not really getting in the right places, of trying to boost the media rights, payment for Scottish clubs, which is quite minimal. So I think that's the issue after what happened like over 2 decades ago. They've now, I think Scottish football, it's like because of when clubs have gone into administration, have got or sees like a Gretna and so forth. Yeah, that's why some clubs are now semi-professional, particularly some clubs here in Edinburgh. I think Edinburgh City is a semi-professional club, and there's a few others as well. So they can't, they've had to come through the Highlands and the Lowland leagues, but they can't compete with some of the teams that are professional. They can do. They're doing decent there. But long term wise, can you stabilize it? Probably not.
The thing is, I think with Scottish football, you've got obviously the big 2, and then like anyone below that, you've got the big 2 with like the global interest and like global fan bases. The big 2 aside, is there really any global appeal to Scottish football?
No, I don't think as much as I would think. Probably there's not as much. Maybe in some small parts, but not like not like in the US. I think the US is different because of the the Glasgow and Rangers and Celtic are the two big clubs that will watch. I think it's when it comes to other clubs, because a lot of our players are domestic players from Scotland. The difference well, some of them add because they come through the youth academy, but some of them don't get the coverage that they want, to see, oh, it's a good, fantastic player. As I've seen our son of one or two Scottish players going to Europe, like Italy, for example, so there has been a bit of extent of, we see getting players from Japan, Australia coming through because of the rules of the work permit rules has changed. And I think that's I think it's driving up a bit, but is it enough to sustain it? That's the question I think the Scottish clubs need to answer themselves, because it's like Celtic and Rangers, their money depends on how they do in Europe. That's the question. It depends how they do in Champions League, Europa League, and so forth. When it's like Aberdeen, Hearts, and Hibs, only Hearts were the only team probably this past season where it was in the other competition, in the Conference League, and they missed out. So so the depth between certain teams, it's way sometimes below par.
And to be fair, I think it kind of comes back to another point. Actually, it was a point that Annie responded to one of my voice messages with, and it was quite interesting. But if, say, for example, you're a Hearts or a Hibs or an Aberdeen, and you're trying to, well, closing the gap with Celtic and Rangers is a pretty mammoth task. But what I would say is, and it's kind of similar to non-parachute clubs in the Championship as well. It's about how, unfortunately, probably the biggest revenue is through player sales. So, and even Celtic and Rangers, for example, have had to have that. Where, for example, Celtic sold Jota, I think it was a couple of years ago.
25 million, and he's got
Yeah, and they've just recently re-signed him for like 8. Yeah, so and don't get me wrong, that's great for Celtic, but like that's probably where it's going to be. And I've got a friend who's a big Sunderland fan but likes Rangers a lot, and we talk about Rangers quite a bit. And even he was saying that it's got to be a strategy where Rangers, for example, need to have the assets, they need to sell right, then you need to reinvest it. Now, the reason I bring it up with the Championship is because, say, for example, Bristol City, right? Let's put them into an example. Alex Scott, for instance, someone who came through, I believe, the academy system, and someone who's made a good stake in the first team for Bristol City. Then he gets sold to Bournemouth for something like 25 million quid, I think it was. Antoine Semenyo, he got sold for something like 10, 12 million, I think. So it's one of them where, unfortunately, if you're not in part of the sort of richer sort of elements of the pyramid, that's where you're going to have to make your money. So again, I know what Ant was comparing to Leicester, and I'm comparing to Sunderland, but I'm comparing to Sunderland because if you look at someone like, right, one of our signings, Chris Metham, good example, right? I think it was us and Sheffield United, I believe, were linked with signing Chris Metham. I bet you that the main reason we were able to come in and take him was because we'd sold Jack Clark, and we had the money coming in from Jack Clark to be able to compete for other deals. I heard another rumour say, and again, it was a rumour, but I don't know how true this is, but apparently we had a deal agreed with Southampton from Adam Armstrong on deadline day. Take out the fact he's obviously a big Newcastle fan, and I respect the fact he won't want to come here, which is fair enough. But that's the only way we would be able to compete for any of these deals. Even when us and Leeds were being loosely linked with Cameron Archer, and us and Burnley for Marcus Edwards. The reason that we're in this conversation is because we're at a point now where we're starting to see big money for a lot of our assets. So say, for example, from our perspective, if we don't go up this summer, then Joe Bellingham and Chris Rigg, two big examples that at least one of them, at least Joe Bellingham, I am certain will move on in the summer if we don't get promoted. And fair enough for the lad's career. Chris Rigg is another one, very highly rated. Now, let's say, for example, if you get 45 to 50 million combined for the two of them, which is what I think we should be looking to get. But from that point, we're now at the point, but this is the point that where we are now is like year 4 or 5 of a multi-phase, multi-year process of getting through assets, selling them, and selling one asset a summer that can fund all of the deals that you do from there. I saw an example, and again, I'll not describe Alan Nixon the same way Ant did in one of the private chats here, but even though he's not wrong. But someone he mentioned that we were apparently linked as a Joe Bellingham replacement was Tommy Doyle from Wolves. Now, that's someone that I'll be massively in favour of signing if we were able to get him. But the point is, how much is that going to cost us? A Championship player these days will probably cost you upwards of 10 million quid these days. Maybe more, depending on how much Wolves want. So, this is the point. So, unfortunately, Annie is probably right. I don't know what you two think, but if you're not one of the parachute clubs, the only way you're going to have a chance of competing at the gap is to, one, recruit well, and particularly to sell well, to reinvest well.
Yeah, and it's like you have to get every move for years perfect. Whatever clubs you're competing with can waste 15, 20 million, and it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I echo that as well. Actually, I don't think there's any more to say about that one because I just think, especially if you're non-parachute clubs, you get a good player, you could sell them for easily. It's just when you're investing in the right player, to get through, and then
Yeah.
another club's interested, you have to sell them. So it's like a merry-go-round.
Well, yeah, pretty much an asset merry-go-round. But it's an example of where this is a weird one. We had Ross Stewart a couple of years ago. We sold him. With some of that money, we then signed Romain Mundle, who then replaced Jack Clark. And with some of the Jack Clark money, we signed Wilson Isidore permanently. So, I mean, there is the point of our strategy is much that we're at the point now where we probably are going to be able to start competing a bit better. And I would say out of the non-parachute clubs, maybe us, apart from maybe Borough and Norwich possibly, but I think us, we should be having the best chance to. I mean, like, say, for example, next season, right? Let's say Leeds, Burnley, and Sheffield United are the teams that go up, and let's say that Leicester, Ipswich, Southampton come back down. I wouldn't expect us to be able to finish in the top two next season. And I know that obviously it would depend how the money you sell for places we invested. But even then, I would expect Leicester to be. Right, there you go. Josh Sargent. I jokingly suggested to Ant, and he said we wanted another striker. There you go and sign Josh Sargent, for instance. But, Leicester could probably go around and say to Norwich, here's 15 million quid.
Yeah, and that's a worrying thing. And it's like, you put that on top of a team that pretty much, like last time, was comfortably one of the best. Well, was the best in the Championship last year. Not comfortably, because obviously there was the top three. But you've then got that on top of with players like Mavididi, who's not good enough for the Premier League, was one of the top performers in the Championship. Fatawu, again, he's injured. But we've already got the core of what's going to be a very good Championship team. And then we're going to be able to spend even more on top of it.
That's the thing. And as well, but to flip it the other way, for parachute clubs, this is probably going to be a problem where, if, say, clubs know that Leicester coming down, right? Clubs know Leicester have money. Mm-hmm. So what can they do? Raise the price and charge it.
This is the thing, though. Like,
that's another thing that's getting ridiculous.
When you say raise the price, but like when we've brought off Championship clubs and they've raised the price, to them, it seemed like they're raising it a huge amount by adding an extra 2 or 3 million. But when you're a Premier League club, that's pocket change. So
yeah,
it's that difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and especially say, for example, if Leeds was to go up this season, then the money. I suppose in one way that's probably why you didn't spend as much in January, Carl. I'd be keen to know, because then it might be that for FFP, save the you've already got for me the best team in the league.
Yeah.
So save the money for if and when you get promoted to the Premier League, and it would take a catastrophe for you not to get promoted. So, but even then, how much are you going to have to spend to have the best chance of staying up and competing?
Listen, I think that will be that. Yeah,
I mean, it's a conversation for the summer, obviously, but
I think it's a conversation because with what's going on with the Rangers link now, and I think that means that we'll probably be under the multi-club ownership model, which means I think there will be some. I don't know. I can't see Rangers players going to Leeds because we won't look at that. We'll look at because we've got the Red Bull as a minority state.
Yeah.
The question is now, it's just making sure. I think it's going to be way more up to probably, if it's the right place, probably up to at least 60 to 90, 80 million, depending on the size that we need to do. I think it's just that it's the goal for me, because you look at the team like Wolves, for example, who's probably the team that's outside of the relegation zone. They've been comfortable for so long until they needed for it to go down, even though they might be staying up the season. But if they don't improve, they could be one of the teams that could be challenging because going down, because they were the other team. I always imagine it could be Man United or Tottenham Hotspur to go down, but that's too big. That would be too big for those clubs to go down to the championship. But in a way, I think that's where we did the right thing not to spend money, and I think that played the reason why there was talks with Rangers for quite a bit initially, and it's become advanced over the last 3 to 4 days, because we did, this was coming equal rapid, because Rangers are a situation that they need sustaining, because like I said, since after looking at what happened over a decade ago with Craig White, who was the controversial owner, and it was making them move assets and stuff, and then they had multiple owners and vice versa. So it's going to be difficult. It depends how much they're going to be put into the club for the transfer this next summer.
Yeah, I like that. That was kind of.
Because I spent
Chris,
within about 30 seconds of being here.
I know.
Oh God, that's going to be interesting, isn't it? So that's what I said. That's said to Ant. That's one example. If Sunderland don't go up, then it'll be me and Ant probably waffling on, going about how Leicester are going to win the league with 100 points, and how and how Coventry will probably start shit and then get into the playoffs or whatever else it is. But yeah, no, it's. I guess the ultimate long story short is like, what the hell do we do about it in terms of, like Anne said, I suppose like Anne said, it's much harder to find a solution to this about how the playing field gets level, because essentially if the current strategy works for the Premier League, they're not going to want to change it, are they?
But they've been resistant to changing it because of, them and EFL are not agreeing to a deal to how to even distribute the solidarity payments to all the clubs, and that's why I'm thinking the Premier League is so hesitant. That's why if you're looking at the Labour government saying, look, if you're not going to resolve the of redistributing the broadcast money to the rest of the clubs, we will step in, and this is going to be a problem where the Premier League are too scared they don't want the government to get involved. But you're like, what do you want then? If you're not wanting to get government involved, do something about it and say it. But to just the Premier League, it's just like it's closed shop, and it has been. And I think since it's for over the last 15 years, before the billionaires did buy the clubs and the takeovers, this was not a problem, but it is now because of the we've got owners that are from over from the states and or hedge funds and so forth don't want to share their money.
The thing
Sorry,
is,
I'm just laughing at the latest comment that's been put in. We won't get 100 unless every player in the club got done for speeding.
the thing is, it shouldn't be on the clubs, because for me, why if you are a Premier League club, why will you want to share your wealth? It should be that the Premier League itself distributes the money.
It should do, but
Because if you're a club though, so if you're a club, you're going to look for your best interest, not
Yeah.
anyone else's. It's the Premier League's job to look at, and the FA's job to look at the best interests of everybody.
I agree, but do you think we should just get rid of the voting rules then? That's why the Premier League is the Premier can't do that, because they have to get approval from 14 clubs to say, right, let's do this. And it just
Yeah, I don't know. I won't, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I don't like the fact it's 14 clubs as well, because it quite often is 14 clubs will vote one way and the same 6 clubs will vote the other way.
Yeah.
And it's always a big 6 that vote one way and everyone else votes the other.
And then shot gasp horror, who ends up winning out in the end? It's I think here's one last thing, because obviously we've been on for 2 hours and 10 minutes or so, but it's been a good discussion this for half an hour. But I think it'd be a good one for Carlton for us to revisit in the summer and see what happens. And particularly from my selfish perspective, if we won the playoffs, for example, then obviously it's particularly relevant to us. But
no, I think we'll revisit this all of it.
No, but it'd be good either way. No, absolutely,
Yeah,
it'd be good either way.
get you guys on, Andy on, Chris from LT, you get Doug, and probably get both Andrew Rogers and Andy Walker, about that.
Yeah.
And get pretty much everyone discussing this, because I think it's going to be interesting where this is going to
Well,
go.
especially when you've got different, like obviously Doug being Liverpool, you being Leeds and Leicester, me Sunderland.
And then the two Andys, Andy Rogers is Man United fan, Andy Walker, Newcastle fan. Yeah, it's going to be, and then you got Reese himself, who's Man United, but he's also a Rangers fan. So it's going to be interesting discussion from all the clubs that we represent about this.
Absolutely. Well, the last question I'll ask before we go off, the FFP thing. Now, obviously, the FFP rule was meant to be designed to try and help clubs, officially help clubs manage what they spend. But what do you guys? I think there comes a point where it seems to me like it's to keep the rich clubs richer and the not so rich clubs, not so rich.
Yeah.
In comparison.
I think it always has been, and it always will be. It's just been dressed up in a different way.
It is.
It's to put a glass ceiling on the big 6. And it's like, as much as you hate them, Newcastle are probably like getting taken over now by who they have been taken over by, happened at almost an irrelevant time, because the wealth that they've got can now not be put into the club because the rules are there. So if you're in the big 6, you can spend basically what you want, and everyone else has got to, every time that they fall foul of FFP, sell one of their big assets. And just out of curiosity, every time one of the teams that are in FFP issues have to sell one of their assets, who do they end up going to? One of the big six.
Yeah, the big six, exactly.
You know, and even from a Newcastle point of view, if you take it out of it for a minute, like, what's the guy's name? Anderson. I've forgotten what his first name is. Elliot Anderson, I think
Elliot
it is.
Anderson,
Yeah,
yeah.
who they, and there was one of the wingers there to sell to Brighton.
Inter.
Winter,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. Yeah, they had to sell them just to be able to keep themselves in FFP restrictions.
And they still had to do it recently. They had to sell Lloyd Kelly to Juventus on the obligation. So I'm just like, how, so...
But that's in itself ridiculous how the money is. But to be fair, if I'm going to be objective about Newcastle, that is ridiculous that they had to do that because essentially it feels like the rules aren't there for the likes of Man City and Liverpool, for instance.
See, the thing is,
But the
Man
British-
City, Man City had to do that before the first set of FFP came in. They had to spend more, and then before they did, and now Newcastle can't do that because of that. So
Yeah, so it always feels like it favours one set of clubs over everybody else. Now, from a selfish point of view, I'm happy about that because it lessens the chance Newcastle win trophies, but that's not the point. If you look at it objectively, it isn't fair that they have to go through that process when some other clubs don't. Now, so yeah, no, it's a fascinating one to sort of to think about, but it just got me thinking about, and I think it was watching Burnley the other night, obviously because of our involvement until now in the top two race, but also because of how we're obviously a non-parachute club and how we're the club that's the outsiders in there. But it got me thinking about how the gap's just like ridiculously stupid. And even if we do go up to the Premier League, like I said, if we somehow went up, the money we'd have to spend would be the most we've probably ever spent in our history, and even then that probably might not be enough. So
yeah, it's like Ipswich have spent over 100 million and they're already relegated by mid-February.
Yeah.
But have you noticed that they spent 100 million, but they basically just signed the best players of the championship last year, didn't they?
Yeah, because I think they're half new, and like obviously it's not the intention, but I think being realistic, they knew there was a very big probability that they would be coming straight back down.
Yeah, and then obviously, but what that does though is it at least solidifies Ipswich as now a parachute club in there, and even when you've got players that are going to be better than 75% of the championship, isn't it? So that's where I'm going to find it incredibly interesting, and I'm going to be interested to see how, say Southampton Southampton obviously finishing rock bottom, how they're going to fare next season in the championship, but. Yeah, I mean, and even if you're looking at perspective of what Luton are doing this year as a parachute club. Now, I know that's a bit different because a lot of their money's going towards their new stadium, I believe. But even then, they've been able to spend bigger than probably most of the championship, and yet obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but it makes that potential double relegation even more shocking. So, but no, guys, I think unless you've got anything to add, I think we might actually leave it there because it's,
No, I think I'm happy to leave it there. And do you know what? And I know Sam out of face, he's a subscriber to our channel, so I appreciate you. The NEC's going to exciting top to bottom, mate. Yeah, it is, and hopefully, Sam, when you do through, we can review the championship at the end of the season. If you want to join us at the end of the season, we can all discuss it because it's going to be interesting. And as well, we do the big season review for all the leagues, including the competitions as well. So, no, we'll appreciate if you could join us during later on in the season. We'll appreciate that. Yeah. But you know what? Yeah, let's just. Yeah,
hopefully, you're happy because you've won the league, and I'm happy because we've won the playoff final.
That's all I say. And then Anthony
will be because. Well, I'm not even going to be depressed. I accepted relegation about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, but you laugh about it, but it's depressing as a fan, isn't it? When you're having to sort of go, well, yeah, well, if we go to the Premier League, it's going to be crap, and we're going to get relegated. So it's like,
yeah, but I'll be happy because we're back in the Championship next season, and I can have a fun year again.
Yeah,
yeah, it's continue the cycle all over again.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and thank you for you as well presenting co-hosts, and I'm glad I came on to the last stages. I appreciate that. But I am back presenting next week once the last game of Monday Night Football for us is done.
I know. Well, so far though, to be fair, I mean the TV fixtures haven't been announced for after the international break yet, have they?
I'm gonna.
I was literally just going to say about the last game. So far,
yeah. And I knew my head and just thought, shit, yeah. I know.
It was last year, Carl. It was literally. One of us would play Friday, the other would play Monday.
Yeah, it was exactly that. I think we played more Fridays than you guys did because of So
and then we were playing Monday, Because there was
Monday night,
periods where
yeah.
we played 5 Mondays in a row.
It pissed me off when we played Friday nights. I thought, fuck, it's not going to help the fans completely. It's like our fans just.
But have you noticed when you kick off on a Friday though, like if your team loses, your weekend's already ruined, and you haven't
Yeah,
even
I
started the
know.
weekend.
That was a killer.
Yeah.
That was a
Well, we play this coming Friday, so hopefully
We
my
played on
weekend's.
Friday, and I didn't even get to the 28th minute before I was back in the concourse.
Well, the last thing I'll say on this, well, Carl said obviously that the Sunderland win this time for Leeds was the equivalent of beating Leicester last season. Leicester still went up last year, so hopefully that's a good omen for us. But we'll see on that one. But yeah,
we'll see. Yeah.
But no, thanks to Ant for joining us. That was really. It was a really good fun discussion, and again, he made it 1 hour and 52 minutes before having a dig at Coventry. So that was that's for him. For him, that is excellent. For him, that is absolutely excellent.
I'll take it. Slow and steady improvements.
Just preparing for next season.
But
at least you need to use the air horn and stuff. So my sound effects, and that's quite good. I did.
Wait until they lose a game. I'll sign myself as first one.
I know. If you're back on next weekend, I'm ready for it.
Right, remember, if we get Coventry in the playoffs, I'll try and get Ant a ticket in that away end.
Yeah, please do. That would be funny.
Yeah, Ant and me in the away end of Sunderland Coventry.
I might come up for the home game as well.
Totally not obsessed. Probably could get you a ticket, to be fair. If you'd really wanted one. Carl came to the Stadium Live for Sunderland Sheffield United.
I did.
So, and I dare I say it was actually a pretty decent game at the time. So,
it was. Especially on a very cold New Year's Eve when I had to get back up. I didn't get back up till after 3 o'clock in the morning.
No, that is true. But the funny thing is, you were standing there right in the home end singing Sunderland songs, which in the end was a result that probably did you guys favours, because it's still a few less points Sheffield United are behind you. So,
and that was Sheffield United's mini explosion when they just lost to Burnley before. So it was good. A good time.
The only time we're gonna have a flipping bad run this season. But there you go. We're out of it now, so I'm not bothered. But anyway, thanks for letting me host, Colin. Thanks, Sam, for joining us. And yeah, that's another week of the Championship review. So yeah, we'll come back next week where hopefully I'm in a much better mood, football wise. But no, I'm enjoying tonight. Thanks, lads, for tonight. It's been great.
Cheers. Have a good weekend. I'm back on next Saturday at 11 o'clock on the Saturday show. I should have Reese from the Weekly Steel Chair and talk about the situation going on at Rangers, and maybe talk about Man United, and also have Chris from LITD TV. We'll talk about the situation at Leicester with all the Project Reset campaign and stuff as well. So
he's talking about Man United quickly. Just imagine that their fantastic draw away at Everton.
I was
David Moyes' Everton.
One. I really did it.
Moyes, yeah, absolutely. That's how bad the standards got. You know, it's funny how like Spurs beat Man U last week, and it's the banter derby or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And Spurs are so slightly less banterific than Man United.
I know.
Oh God.
I know. Gentlemen, as always, we'll see you at the same time next week, and all you have a good week. Take it for now. Bye bye.